Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the October 16th version of the La Plata Electric Association Board of Directors meeting. To start the meeting off, I'd like to ask everyone to rise and say the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Drew, for the fantastic graphic. Always appreciated. Call the meeting to order, and first item of business is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion for agenda approval? John Lee, thank you. Is there Joe Lewandowski? Joe with the second. Any discussion on the agenda as it stands? Don't see any hands. I'll make a suggestion on the election section. It would be item 4 on the agenda. I would like to ask us to add a letter D, election of a tri-state monitoring position. And we can put that on the agenda and then actually have the discussion as to whether or not we need that and or who it should be. So I wouldn't suggest that agreeing to modify the agenda is agreeing to that position, just that we should have that as part of our discussion. So I'd like to propose that modification.
Second.
Let's see. Graham, are we doing that right as far as
yeah,
Robert's rules?
Yep, exactly. And you've got a second.
Okay.
Was that Kirsten? Were you?
Yeah, Kirsten or Nicole. Okay. So let's see. Moved and seconded to modify the agenda as I mentioned. Then, Graham, do we just vote on the modified agenda, or do we vote on the modification and then approve the agenda?
No, let's just vote on the modified agenda. So
voting on approving the modified agenda. Any other discussion on that? Okay, so all in favor of accepting the agenda as presented with the modification that I proposed, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. We have an agenda. Then first item on the agenda is member comments and concerns. Graham, do you have the preamble ready for us?
I do. The board encourages comments about the cooperative from its members. The board will take all member comments under consideration, but it will not provide a response during the member comment period. The board asks that each participant's comments pertain to cooperative business. Those wanting to address the board during the public comment period are granted 5 minutes to address their topics. Lengthy comments to the board should be submitted in writing. Formal complaints must be filed in writing and submitted in compliance with applicable board policy. Comments from the public will be directed to the entire board, not to any individual. No personal attacks will be allowed. Failure to follow these requirements may cause the public comment period to be terminated. Copies of our cooperative policies and procedures on public comment and filing complaints are available on our cooperative website.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Janelle, can you help us out with any comments from the waiting room?
Looks like Emily has her hand up.
All right,
So
Emily, you have the floor first. Go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. I'm Emily Frogen. I live in District 3, and I just wanted to comment that I attended the focus group this month at the LPEA office, and it was great. The group that you all used was really informative and really helpful, and I wanted to just kind of commend you all for selecting them and doing those focus groups, and I hope that kind of the public can see the result of them, and I'm just really excited to hear more about what's done with that information and what are the next steps, because it was really meaningful. So hope that you all continue that. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. We appreciate you bringing that feedback to our attention. Next, it looks like we have Bruce. Can we let Bruce in? Go ahead, Bruce.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thanks.
Hi, just wanted to touch base. I'm a member here in Durango. I've owned property for 32 years out County Road 136 in a development area called Long Hollow, and was disappointed to make contact with a solar provider here in town who over 33 years, and I guess occasionally reading the paper, I'd never heard about red zoning, and was disappointed to understand and find out that my neighbor is not in the red zone, but you take a step across my property line and I'm in a red zone. He explained to me the dynamics of that, some of which I understand, and having to do with capacity and the percentage of renewables that are on the system. Just wanted to touch base and let you know that there are people out here who are interested in becoming a member when, and not be off grid. I guess it appears off grid my only option. There's also another situation which I don't know if you're 100% involved with, but I talked to him and asked if I could do some kind of hybrid connection out there where I could be have a connection to the grid through you, but then also on the side have solar on my house. And he told me you can't do that. I was a little surprised to learn that, and I got the impression that some of it might be at your end, and then some of it might be at the state level. The idea that one property cannot be connected to two power sources. One power source would be you guys, and the next power source would be a solar installation. And I said, well, if we keep the systems completely separated, I want to use the grid for an electric car, which is kind of an occasional high demand item, electric car charger, and maybe for electric heat and things like that. But he said, no, you can't do it. The electrician inspector will not sign it off. I don't know how much influence you have on that aspect of it, but as of right now, it appears that I'm being kind of pushed in the direction of being completely off grid, and watching to see what happens with the service level in my area. So I just want to let you know that there are people out there that want to do things and connect to your system, but it appears for me there are two stumbling blocks that I've run into. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time and the opportunity to speak with you all. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks very much, Bruce, for spending your time to make us aware of that. I'll assure you that the board is aware of yours and many other members' concerns about that situation. I would encourage you to reach out to LPEA staff for more clarity on the more technical details that you brought to our attention, and some clarity on what is and isn't allowed currently. And I'll leave it at that. But thank you very much for attending this morning. Okay, I don't see any other hands. So we'll move out of member comments and into item 3 on the agenda, the consent board items. And do I have a motion, please, to approve consent board? I see Kohler. Thank you, Kohler. And second, I see Joe Lewandowski. Thank you. So moved and seconded to approve the consent board items. Any discussion on those items? All right, seeing none, we'll go to a vote. All in favor of approving the consent board items, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, unanimous on that. Moving on to the next.
Kirsten has her hand up now.
Yep, okay. Sorry, Kirsten, go ahead.
It blends a little with their background.
Look like you're on mute. Okay, we got you.
You're just introducing.
It's for the item that you were just.
Going into the elections. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you can all see what we're going through there. You're aware that we added that item D to this section. Yeah, Kirsten, I'll let you go ahead and kick it off.
Yeah, I sent the board last week a couple of thoughts on how do we want going forward to think about some strategy about, do we want to have more exposure of ourselves and of exposure of regional folks to us and national folks to us, or do we want to be more insular or whatever? So I'm not expecting any decisions today, but I would like us to see, as we kind of think, as we move forward and we start doing more strategy sessions, that we include that in some of our strategy thinking. Do we want to leave people in place longer so that they can achieve seniority at groups? Do we want to have some sort of a path forward in our officer group? Nothing today, again, just want you to kind of plant this in your head as you're thinking. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, kind of clarity, Kirsten, on the emails that you sent out and we reviewed. And yeah, I mean, just to reiterate, as it stands right now, we kind of revisit, committee appointments and officers on a yearly basis, and we don't really have a defined strategy for that. It is our goal to give a lot of people an opportunity to, and turn these over every year, or is our goal something along the lines of seniority and tenure and continuity? And so I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and certainly it's something that we should roll into discussions discussions about our overall strategy and how that pertains to committee and officer selections or appointments. Thanks for bringing that up. Dan Huntington, I see your hand up.
Yeah, going into these elections and committee appointments, it appears to me that some of the committee appointments have been pretty biased, excluding any directors from the District 2, particularly on the standing committees. And I think each district needs to have a representative on the executive committee. So in other words, John, we are pretty representative on the executive committee right now. So anyway, that's my thoughts. We need to, District 2 represents the people in District 2. We represent everybody, but District 2 elected the directors in District 2.
Okay, thank you for that, Dan. Okay, Kohler, also some preamble conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up that part D. I don't know if this is the time, or should I wait till after the election to talk about that?
No, I think this is appropriate. We can, we could save it for D and then discuss whether it's appropriate or the board wants to have it, or we can make that decision ahead of, before we even jump into elections. Might give people a better overall view of who's doing what if we discuss it ahead of time. So yeah, I'm okay with that. Kohler, jump in, provide comments on that.
Okay, so I feel a little blindsided by it that we just found out about that this morning. And I think, just like what we're talking about, a few other things, we need somewhat of a defined strategy on what this position does. If it's a paid position, if it's not a paid, I don't know exactly what it entails, and I really don't know the purpose of it. So I would want that before I could support it. So, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Cole, let me give you, since I brought it up, I'll give you my idea behind it. And obviously that's not, not really for me to decide, it's for all of us to decide, but I also understand the, let's just say, last minute nature of this consideration. The reason it came up for me was having attended a few tri-state events recently, and kind of, and I had some aha moments there that, there's a lot of information that's being shared that we are privy to if we want it, but we tend to not, individually take the time to go get it. And I thought that there would be value in having an individual who was assigned to trying to gather up any information that was available, through essentially public presentations or invite presentations that the Tri-State has. So that was the impetus for the idea, and I know that Kirsten's been kind of doing that and sort of egging on, other board members to attend those things when they can. But she was doing it, purely on her own time or unpaid. And it occurred to me that, if we're going to rely on someone to do that, that we should have that be a quote unquote paid position, right? I mean, there are no paid positions, but you get compensated as you would for any other, attendance at assigned or mandatory, outside meetings and committee meetings. So as far as that paid terminology, in my mind, and when I brought this up as an agenda item, that was my expectation. I would not, I guess third point there that you brought up, Kohler, was the surprise of this, and comment well received. I think if there is sort of agreement on the board, this isn't necessarily an item that a decision that has to get made today. There's really no specific urgency. I don't think that it's sort of required. It's not required at all, but it's definitely not required this month. And so if it was something that this board felt like needed to have longer consideration, I think that would be also a reasonable path forward here. So I think what we should strive to do here is make a decision as to whether or not we want to vote on, or whether or not we want to actually have that position, and then secondarily whether or not we want to make the decision as to who would hold that position. Let's try and make that first decision today, and so we'll push towards a vote on that, just here as quickly as we can. Probably in order to do that, and maybe I'll look for Graham to nod, we should have a motion that we actually want that, right? I just put it on the agenda and you all agreed to that, but we don't actually have a motion to consider that, an LPEA position. So maybe, Rachel, I see you have a comment, but maybe it's best if we actually get this in a motion before we move on to discussion.
Didn't we elect officers first?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to move that up, we can sort of have a motion to amend the agenda to discuss the tri-state monitoring position.
Oh, because it's D, not yeah. Well, and I don't have a preference on that. I mean, we can go through elections and hit D when we get to D. It would be sort of a kind of a 2/3 vote at this point to modify the agenda again. And unless anyone thinks we really need to, let's move through A, B, C, and then discuss D. All right, I'm going to take a couple of thumbs up there, and we won't modify the agenda at this point. Rachel, does that put your hand back down, and we'll wait for D to have?
Yeah, just because I saw a head nod, so it sounds like people are okay moving through.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and jump up to 4A, which is election of officers. And unless there's disagreement, we'll go kind of in the normal path. We'll do president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, and we'll kick that off with.
In lieu of ballots, Drew and I were trying to recall how we did this last time we had an officer vote via a Zoom meeting. I think probably the best is for people to text me. I'm going to send the board an email with my cell phone and we can, you can text me your votes for position. If you'd say,
Yeah, give us a little more clarity on what you like. So let's just
Yep, so
assume that
just
we
say-
have
just-
multiple candidates.
yeah, so we'll say, so let's probably start off with, like, if we're voting for candidates individually as opposed to as a slate, we would say like P and then write the name of your vote.
And do that, presumably do that sort of 4 times, Graham, if we
Yep.
are doing individual and not a slate.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a quick technical question? Are we not
Absolutely.
able to do polls, Drew?
Yeah, we
And
could
vote
do polls. We could do
Yeah.
polls in Zoom, but we just thought it was a little simpler just to send the
Does
text.
polls, are polls confidential, Drew, or? I mean, I think
Yeah.
they are. Okay.
Yeah.
Would people prefer to do it as polls? Is that something we can
They
accommodate?
have to
here?
modify the Zoom settings to allow for polling.
Rachel's saying too complex, or at least that's the way I'm reading the head shake.
Yeah.
So is there anyone that's not okay with the proposal to do this via text to Graham?
Can you email us all your phone number, Graham?
I did. Hopefully it went through.
Thank you.
All right, and then as we're getting started here, I think it makes sense for everyone just to go ahead and send, make sure Graham gets 12 text messages. So just send Graham a text that says test or something along those lines as we kind of move forward with nominations. All right, let's keep this moving. Starting out with president. Let's see. Well, let me give one more heads up before we move into this. Just remember that there may be some discussion about who does what they can do, what they can't do, what they should do, and just remember that we're doing all this in open session. So let's make sure to mind our P's and Q's and sort of be respectful, as we all should be in a professional setting. I know that we go in and out of these open and executive sessions, and so I think it's fair to make sure that everyone's reminded that we are doing this in front of the general public. So that reminder, we'll move into president and sort of accept nominations. I would like to go ahead and self-nominate. I would very much like to remain in that office. Any other nominations for president? Self-nominations? Rachel, comment.
Process question. So
Yeah.
once we get nominations, do folks then speak and give a statement? Can you remind?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll do that. We'll sort of go when somebody does something, when somebody's nominated by somebody else, we'll allow that person to either accept or decline that nomination. And then once we have a full slate, we'll let each candidate speak to that. So I have received a text message nomination for Kirsten. So Kirsten, would you accept a nomination for president?
I would not. I appreciate the nomination, but no, thank you.
So right now we have Ted as the sole nominee for president. We have.
All right. Well, let's move ahead with that. I mean, I won't take too much of the opportunity to give the speech, but I'm excited about the opportunity. It has clearly been a lot of work over the last year. I think took me a while to get my feet under me, and I appreciate the patience of the board and certainly staff in allowing me to get there. I think my feet are largely underneath me, and I'm excited to do this for another year. But at the same time, I'm always and absolutely open to constructive criticism along the way. I know sometimes I get positive feedback, and I love that. You probably know that about me. But constructive criticism is part of my platform today. So that's all I'll say at this point. Graham, process, do we go to a vote with only
Process is
one
that
candidate?
as secret ballots, where everyone should still text their vote to me, because theoretically everyone could still write in
Right.
somebody else.
And what do you want? Yes.
Like, yes, a president, Ted would work now, or President Ted, or P Ted,
or P anybody else if you want to
or
write.
P anybody else. Yeah. I have 11 votes for Ted, so he is elected president.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Appreciate that. So I'll keep running the meeting today. So we'll move on to vice president. Nominations or self-nominations. Tim, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'll nominate Rachel.
Okay, thank you. Rachel, would you accept that nomination?
I would, thank you.
Okay.
I also note, I believe we're gonna have to track it down in the, I believe I also received a text message nomination for Rachel as well, so.
Okay. Any other nominations for VP? Dan, I see your hand.
I nominate Kirsten.
Thank you, Dan. Kirsten.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. I'd like to turn that down, and I'd like to tell folks why. I don't know if you all remember that last year when I ran for VP, I said it's because I want to be president 2 years. So I wanted to be VP for 2 years and then be president for my last 2 years at LPEA. And then in the last year, I've been thinking about what the president role means, and it's very you have a much closer tie to operations, and I'm more interested in governance. So I'd like to step back from VP and not waste that year and have somebody else do it. I will be pushing to make that VP role, though. One of the things it says for the VP is, and other duties as the board assigns, and I think we need to make that a much more robust position. And now that I'm no longer in it, I won't feel like I'm self-advocating. So I'm going to be advocating for a lot more responsibility in that role. And thanks again, Dan. I really appreciate the nomination, and I'm sorry I changed my mind in the last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarity in those comments, Kirsten.
I've also received a text message nomination for Nicole for vice president. Nicole, do you accept that nomination?
I do not. I'm actually going to put my hat in the ring for secretary. So thank you for the nomination. And while I have the floor, I'd also like to throw John Witchell's name in to consider the role of vice president.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am pretty fired up about this potential new committee. I think it's a something that plays well to my strengths, and I can add a lot more value running that committee than I could being a vice president or another executive role. So I will go ahead and decline that and hope that there's consensus that I can participate in the in this new committee that we're talking, the risk committee that we're talking about creating. So it would be my intention at that time. But thank you for the vote of confidence. I'm pretty excited. Excuse me. I think Rachel would do a great job as VP. So thank you, though.
All right. Thank you, John. Any other, let's see. So we only have one correct me if I'm wrong, Graham, only one accepted nomination at this point, which is Rachel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then anything else from the board before we go to vote on this one? Okay, then
Do
let's
you
go
want
ahead.
to hear from
Can I
Rachel?
share?
Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. And go ahead, Rachel, talk to us.
Great. Well, thanks all. Yeah, so my thoughts with this actually piggyback directly off of what Kirsten was saying. And I think we're evidenced even by kind of the first part of our meeting today. It appears to me we've had a lot of things come up around some of the mechanics of board governance and the structures of it that get kicked to the curb, as we'll discuss this later. And we don't, and it's not for a lack of probably interest. I think it's for a lack of capacity, right? We've had some fairly large things we've been noodling on between CEO hiring, power supply, et cetera. And, you know, I believe that kind of where I can lend some strength is actually buttoning up a few of those pieces. So when we talk about, let's continue, I wrote a quote, continue this in strategy discussions later around how we elect our board officers, my thought would be to actually put forward a process, use this vice president seat to put forward a process to you all that feels good and clear. So we're not wasting a lot of board time working through that, but where there's clarity. Similar places include, how does one get something on an agenda? And just making sure some of those things are cleaned up and cleared up for all of us to be able to govern more effectively and put our energy towards that. So that's kind of my thought for how I could support Ted in this role and what I could bring to it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. Okay, let's go ahead and move to that vote. Same thing, texting Graham, VP with either Rachel's name or write-in if you prefer.
I have 10 votes for Rachel and no votes for anyone else. So Rachel wins. Congratulations, Rachel. You're the vice president. Next in the order on the bylaws is secretary.
Okay, thanks. I'll entertain nominations for the secretary position or self-nominations. John Witchell, I see your hand.
I'll go ahead and nominate Nicole.
Nicole, do you accept that nomination? Thank you. Kohler, you're next.
Yes, I'd like to nominate John Lee.
John Lee, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll note that I also have received a text nomination for John Lee.
Okay, so far we have John and Nicole with accepted nominations. Let's see. Something else from you, John Witchell? No, okay, hand's still up. Any other nominations before we hear from the two nominated candidates? Dan Huntington.
Yeah, I'd like to support John Lee. Being the chairman of the policy committee, it takes a year to get your feet on the ground and figure out the best way to change these policies, go through them and everything. So I think John's got 1 year under his belt, and I think he would do an excellent job again.
Thanks, Dan. I think you're next, Kirsten, or was it Kohler? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just need to clarify. I'm sorry, I was at autopilot at the very beginning of this. This is for secretary, not for treasurer, right? And
You're
based on-
correct.
Yes, the order that they appear in our bylaws is president, vice president, secretary, treasurer. So I just was going to go in bylaw
Okay.
order.
I appreciate your patience.
All right, then Kohler, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I'd like to just kind of back up what Dan said about John, because I feel the same way. And in addition, what Dan brought up earlier, I do think it's important to have a representative from District 2 on the executive committee. So I definitely back John. I think he did a really good job as far as the negotiation for the intermittent CEO. And I've attended quite a few of the policy committee meetings, and I think he's done very good on the governance. And he showed quite an amount of patience with things through, but he got them through. So again, I'm behind John. Thank you.
I'm
You
gonna
describe my role as CEO as interim and not intermittent, but I guess if that's
yeah, intermittent means you're gonna have to do it again, which you hope is not the case. I'm gonna
Stand
jump,
corrected.
I'm gonna go ahead and jump to the candidates, Kirsten, and come back to you if that's okay. Let the candidates give their kind of why they want to do this, why they think they should be there, and I guess as incumbent, John Lee, I'll let you go first.
I think that it does take a little bit of time to get into rhythm. And I thought we moved through policies well last year. I extended extra effort to be inclusive on last minute, ideas and thoughts so that they were at least captured and talked about. And I did, even though it was short-lived, when I was able to do the contract negotiations with Graham, there was a couple of different camps on, how should it look? And I think it was a very positive and win-win situation on that. And we were able to come out of that with the interim CEO with, more important than the cost savings off of a full bill would be that he hit the ground running. And we were able to frame some of those things up, and I don't think a couple of dollars was going to change how robust he hit it. And those were things that we talked about during that contract negotiation period. So I was proud of that. So Nicole and I spoke yesterday about this. She called and said she was going to throw her hat in the ring. And, if there's something that needs to be done different, then I imagine it will go a different route. But if we're taking a look at, things that Rachel asked about in that email tasker, a duty description is already written. How much time is spent on it? We can take a look at the time that we spend on our little time cards. How much meetings time do we have? How much research time do we have? I felt fortunate to be able to work with Graham on it. He executes the policy stuff great. And then the last thing that I would say with it is when we were doing the hiring stuff a month ago, Ted made comment to me that he wasn't going to go back on to the policy committee. He's going to leave that open to somebody else. I imagine that's subject to change. I don't know. But at the time he said, he did it last year because I was going to be in it fresh, and that he felt like it was going to run on just fine. So that's, I'm willing to continue to do that. There are some of those things, the difference, as pointed out in the bylaws, about the difference between the board secretary, this position, and the secretary to the board, Janelle's position. Maybe that will get massaged out, more details somewhere else, but it isn't conflicting or complicated in that relation. So I'll continue to do an accurate job if put forward.
Thanks very much, John Lee. Nicole, go ahead and give us your campaign speech.
Sure. Well, thank you, John, for the work you did this past year. And, you know, my particular interest in this role is with the Committee on Policy. You know, it's in my nature to read things carefully and think about what they mean, and then have a conversation if that's what is meant to be, if that's what we want. And I think that the first, when I looked at like the policy 110, where it was designating the authority for this policy, you know, I felt like it was being answered to the reviewing the policies and receiving some of the input, but I often feel like there needs to be a place to air out good ideas and determine if they need board attention. You know, some of the things Kirsten brought up in those emails when she was comparing our committees to Holy Cross and was saying like, hey, do we want a strategy and communication committee, or can we make sure that these objectives are being addressed someplace? You know, what is our objective with external affiliations? And I was like, well, where do these conversations go? You know, they sort of just die on an email thread sometimes. Like there's a space between, you know, an unorganized email thread that kind of gets sort of read by everyone and commented by a few, and then, you know, board attention where we have stacked agendas, where I don't think that's the right place. So where I was thinking, I actually had considered, expanding the meeting length a little bit so that we would continue to be working through the committee policies that John has done an excellent job doing, but also opening this space for more frank conversation among board members and decide, hey, you know, this came up. Is this something that we want to act upon? Is it already being addressed? But so that when board members have these good ideas, they don't just die in the ether of email threads. So that is why I would like to be your next secretary. You're muted, Ted.
And
Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's important to have somebody on District 1 on the executive committee, and because we're so bloody far away, but I get the importance of having somebody on District 2 because they're a different animal than some of the other districts. So I don't know what we do about that. Of course, we still have another position to go. Thank you.
Yep, thanks for that point, Kirsten. John Mitchell, your input?
Yeah, I think it is important as we enter this period of transition with the new leadership. One of the things that I was it was a low priority for me, but I definitely saw it. It was we have an opportunity to fix what I think is not great right now, which is that sometimes the Pagosa side of our territory just doesn't get enough visibility. We don't do enough meetings there. We don't do enough. We just don't have as big a physical presence there as I think we should, and I think we do a disservice to that side of our territory. I think that putting Nicole in the executive committee is a good first step, and I think it's an important step at this exact moment because it will because our new CEO will follow our lead. And so if we're sitting there and saying, hey, it's appropriate for you to go over to Pagosa with some regular cadence and make sure that you're having FaceTime, both with the leadership as well as the team, I think that's going to go a long way to fixing what I think is a deficiency in how we run our business today. I appreciate the point that maybe we should have one from each district. I think that's a separate conversation entirely. And I think the value of having somebody in Pagosa on the executive team exceeds the value of I guess is high value, and that's a big part of my own consideration for recommending Nicole. Thank you.
John. Other hands, I'll take a stab at it as well. Seeing no other hands, my comments, and I'm sort of going to make this from you know, my chair now as president. You know, Nicole's talked to me several times about interest in leadership, and you know, this is over the course of a long period of time. And as this opportunity came up, you know, I'll just be frank, Nicole was interested in being VP, and you know, kind of moving into leadership. And with her, I had a conversation about the value that I gained from you know, being on the policy committee or chairing the policy committee, you know, prior to becoming president, and having that learning experience, you know, from really two perspectives. One is chairing, you know, kind of the generic statement of scheduling, chairing, you know, managing that, you know, smaller organization, the committee, but also just the deep dive into policy knowledge. And so, you know, I sort of nudged her in that direction, that, you know, if you see a path, you know, and one of your motivations for being on the LPEA board is to provide leadership to that board, that this would be a good path to take, and potentially a better path than just VP and president. And then the other comment I would have there is, you know, there's sort of two very clear roles here. One is a member of executive committee, and the other is chair of committee on policies. And I think my comment about committee on policy, that's all I'll say about that one. As far as executive committee goes, you know, this is just me stating kind of the facts as I see them. But you know, John, you did a great job on committee on policy, and certainly your anecdote about the negotiation process that you went through was hugely successful and a benefit to the organization. I am challenged with your availability sometimes, and how, you know, how necessarily committed you are to, you know, to your other work, your other occupation, and I see that as not existential, but a contributing factor to why I think I would prefer to have Nicole on the executive committee. That's it for me. Any other comments? I see Kirsten's hand back up.
Yeah, Ted, thanks for bringing up that policy is a good growth place. You know, I know we usually have the new folks on Roundup because it's a great introduction to the community. And so I don't know what we're going to do this year. But, you know, I think policy is a good place for that. That's interesting. And you also mentioned that to you about leadership opportunity. So I just want to ask John, actually, do you see your future at LPEA as you're wanting to grow within the executive committee, or just quickly, if you can, say is this where you want to stop, or do you want to keep going further in the executive committee?
Oh, I'd continue on if I had the opportunity. Yeah, I've had, you know, came in during COVID and had one in-person meeting in 2.5 years at the beginning of it. And I enjoy it, and I do have restrictions on availability. You know, that's it. I am fully engaged, and I feel as an elected official that that's what I'm supposed to be able to do. But this isn't a full-time job, even though there's a whole lot of work that goes along with it and has a lot of dedication. So yes, I would, you know, love to throw my hat in the ring at some point when it wasn't as robust as it is right now for the presidency. But just like you know, what we think a couple of years later varies, I'm sure. So.
Great. Thank you for John. I appreciate that.
Can I address that too, Kirsten?
Yeah, go, Nicole.
So, I mean, I'm glad you brought that up because is something we've talked about. My objective to be in leadership. I'm very proud to be part of this organization, and I have a lot of energy to put into it. And I think that I think that I would do a really good job in that role. And I also, I'm glad you also pointed out the Pagosa connection, because that's something that, we keep kind of talking about, but nobody has been a point person of let's make sure things don't fall off the map in Pagosa. And so when I had talked to Ted about the position on the executive board and, what my role could be in there, I had suggested, I was like, I'd like to have that be part of my focus is to be like, hey, these are things that are happening in Pagosa. Make sure somebody is looking at that. Or what are we trying to do in Pagosa? Because if that's important to us, we need someone at the table. We need to have like exactly, there's the physical table of, hey, let's come to Pagosa sometimes and actually sit here and see the facility and see our employees, but then also the table in these meetings of being like, this is your priority. You need to know, like, I know what's going on in the community. I'm very involved in it. So I think I would do a really good job for LPEA in being the Pagosa representative.
Okay, thanks very much, Nicole. You might have just frozen. Did you finish?
She did.
All right, no, she finished. Okay, that was inopportune time to freeze, but I think you just got it done. Anything else before we move to vote on the two candidates for secretary? Okay, so yeah, same process. Ask for secretary if you care, and then either Nicole, John, or write in is still an option. So send your text to Graham, please.
Ted, I can't get my vote to go through, but I'm voting for John Lee.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks for getting that on the record. Graham, you good with that?
I am.
Okay.
Well, guess this is why we have, let's see. All right, by a vote of 7-5, Nicole Pitcher is our new secretary.
Okay, thanks, Graham. Congratulations, Nicole, who is frozen again, but hopefully she can hear the congratulations. And thank you so much, John, for your service in that position and the excellent work you did. And just pointing out that this is board work, and unanimous is not always what we're going for. We need to make decisions and move forward. And so the board has made this decision and we'll move forward in that direction. One left to go. Last but certainly not least, treasurer position. Let's go ahead and take nominations or self-nominations. Tim, you're first.
Yeah, I'll nominate myself for the position.
And do you accept that nomination?
If
Thank you,
so,
Tim.
granted, yes.
Thank you. Anybody else who's up for that role? Or anybody else that you want to put up for that role? Dan Huntington.
I'll nominate David Lucian.
Thank you, Dan. David, you have a nomination for treasurer. How do you feel about that?
Dan, I'd like to say thank you. I've been on the FAC. I'd like to continue on the FAC. And with Tim Wheeler's leadership as treasurer on the FAC, I've really enjoyed that. And I would like to decline, but thank you, Dan. That's a big surprise. I appreciate it. Made my day.
Nice. All right, so last call for nominations for treasurer. Okay, seeing none. Tim, will you go ahead and give a little statement about your glutton for punishment there?
Well, I first would like to say thanks to all the members on the committee over certainly the past year, because it's a team effort. It's not just me on the FAC. And believe it or not, I enjoy numbers and finances and things like figuring out dashboards and doing that analysis, and especially with the help of a really great staff that participates, and a great VP of finance. And so I'm kind of excited about being able to do it again, and appreciate any feedback people have along the way, and any good or bad, and look to just try and continue to improve. I also think maybe one last thing is that we are in a time of transition, as we all know, and some continuity on this and familiarity with these finances and numbers, I think, is important. And I believe I represent that to a large extent. So I really, I'm excited and appreciate any vote of confidence the rest of the board has in my ability to lead it. And I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tim. John Witchell, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to take 20 seconds here because the the FAC leadership never gets any acknowledgement of the work, the hard work that they've done, and the good work that they've done. And I just want to take a moment to say thanks, Tim. You've done a great job managing a very, very time-consuming and very difficult and completely thankless committee. And you were the first person in 5 years who actually got me to file an expense report at LPEA, if nothing else. That's quite the accomplishment. So thank you again for your service.
Thank you, John. That was very nice. Appreciate it.
Yeah, not to stretch it out, but I would tag on and go above and beyond FAC. Tim has been an excellent member of the executive committee, always willing to provide input, and it's extremely helpful for me. We've developed a close enough relationship that Tim can provide some of that constructive criticism that I was asking for earlier, and so I'm excited to move forward with Tim on that team. So yeah, anyone else before we go to that treasurer vote? All right, let's do it. One more text to Graham. At least one more for this section.
have 10 votes for Tim Wheeler as treasurer and no votes for anyone else. So Tim Wheeler will be our new treasurer.
Okay. Congratulations, Tim. Thank you for your service. Look forward to moving forward. That wraps us up for section A. Let's go ahead and move on to section B, which is directors for Roundup Board. So we need two. Incumbents are Nicole and David. Let's go ahead and start off with either nominations or self-nominations for Roundup Board. Yeah, Graham, you'll have to help us get creative on this one. You know, we're basically going for two people in this position.
Yeah, and so this is a little less precise, right? Our bylaws call for officer elections to be by secret ballot, but we don't, not necessarily for these other positions, right?
Okay.
So we can discuss it openly if there's a slate of two people that want to run together or things of that nature. We can do that if we decide that we want to sort of have cumulative voting where everybody vote, you know, say we have three people running, everybody votes for two, and the two with the highest votes go in, might be.
Okay, so some options will help guide us through that as we get to closure there. David, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'd like to self-nominate.
Okay, thank you very much. David's hat is in the ring.
Yep.
Nicole, I see your hand.
I would like to nominate Kirsten.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. Kirsten, you have a nomination to serve on Roundup. How do you feel about that?
I'd like to be back on there. That's a great position. Thank you.
Okay, I heard yes, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh,
All right.
sorry.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. Okay, so we have two hats in the ring. Anybody else interested in doing that personally, or does anybody else want to throw somebody else's hat in the ring at this point? Okay, I don't.
Dan
Huntington, you're on mute.
muted,
Sorry.
Dan.
I move to close nominations and elect David and Kirsten as by acclamation.
Okay, thank you for that.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, someone should. Okay, I see
John Lee. John Lee seconds.
Yep. Okay, so is that acceptable, Graham? Can we move straight to that vote?
We can, especially if we have, if this would be a vote to close nominee. So I guess if the vote fails, then the nomination will stay open, and if the vote passes, then the two candidates slate will be approved by acclamation.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so any discussion on this motion? Clarification on the motion? All right, then all in favor of closing the nomination process and accepting the two candidates, say aye.
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 Any opposed to that? And any abstentions? Okay, that looks unanimous, and thank you so much. David and Kirsten, looking forward to your good work on that committee. The board, sorry, it's not a committee. All right, moving on to section C of elections. We need representatives for CREA and Western United. Let's just go CREA first. Holly is the incumbent there. Let's go ahead and take either nominations or self-nominations for that representative position. David, I see your hand.
I'd like to nominate Holly Mitzler.
Okay, thank you. Holly, how do you feel about that?
I would accept that nomination. Thank you.
Great. We have a name in the hat. Anybody else interested in doing that work or suggesting somebody else to be that representative? Okay, last call. All right, let's see. Graham, do we need a vote here?
No, I mean, I said we should have acclamation vote, yes.
Okay, yeah. So then let's go ahead and all in favor of Holly staying on as the representative for CREA, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Or abstentions? Great. All right, we have a CREA representative. Thank you so much, Holly, for your previous service and continued service. Obviously, we think you're doing a great job.
I am grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And sorry, I kind of just zipped right over your opportunity to say anything about that other than being grateful for the opportunity. If you got any more words for us, we'd be happy to hear them.
No, I won't prolong the discussion too much. I do appreciate this opportunity. It gives me an opportunity to grow a lot as a person and to learn a lot about the rural electric industry as it's evolving. I hope I am a good conduit for information for you guys, both to you and to the CRA board as well. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much, Holly. And I will, I receive quite a few compliments from the world larger than LPEA about the work you do there and your interaction with other CREA members. So well done. All right, let's see, on to Western United. David, you're the incumbent. Kohler, nominations.
I'd like to nominate John Lee.
John Lee, how do you feel about that nomination?
No, thank you.
No, thank you. All right. Well, appreciate that. Thank you for the nomination, Kohler. Nicole Pitcher.
I'd like to nominate David Lucian.
Thank you for that. David, how you feeling about that?
I'd love to stay on WUE on the board. Thank you.
Okay. Nomination accepted. Any others? Okay, last call. All right, then we'll go to affirmation vote on this. All in favor of David Lucian continuing as the Western United representative, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Any opposed or abstentions? Did I miss you, Cole, or are you good? Okay, thank you. All right, so there we have it, unanimous. David, you're in for another year at least. Thank you so much for your work. Any further comments on that, David?
Just want to say thank you to everybody. I've loved being on LPEA. I've loved being on Roundup and WUE. And I've actually learned a lot, and I'd like to progress, hopefully, in leadership on the WUE side. It's great seeing the co-op model and how the co-op model works. So very impressed, and this has just been a joy, and I love you all. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, David. Okay, that brings us back around to additional item D, which is this discussion about, and I think I'll kind of envelope this discussion for today's process. Does this board believe we need a position, a specific position, and it would be, and I'll loosely use the terminology paid position and we can change the name. The best I've got is to monitor tri-state and provide feedback to LPEA, but I would just call it tri-state monitoring position. Joe, I'd like to get a motion for this before we move on, if you're willing to do that. Otherwise, we probably won't even discuss it if we don't get a motion in a second.
You got a hand up.
So Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to know a little bit more about what this would entail, and why a board member would be doing this as opposed to the president or the CEO. It just seemed we're kind of leaving tri-state, so I'm just a little fuzzy on the importance of this.
Okay, just to clarify though, cart before the horse still here. Like if we don't have a motion in a second to that this is a useful thing, then we don't even need to discuss it. So Kirsten, your hand's up, but hopefully it's for a motion.
Well, I guess I was going to move to table it, but I guess if there's no second or anything, I don't need to move to table it. It just might.
No, I'll make the motion.
Yeah. Thank you, John. John with a motion.
So we have a motion to consider this position.
Yeah.
Do we have a second? I see Holly and Tim. I see second.
Great.
Okay,
Now
so-
let's have
so-
a conversation.
Carry on with discussion.
Let's get clarity on what the
Mhm.
what the vision there is.
What it actually would be. So yeah, very good questions, Joe. Kirsten, do you want to respond to some of that or add more?
Move to table the motion.
You would like to move, so now we have a motion to table the pending motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, so we have a second, so I think we should
Let's vote on that, right?
vote on whether or not to table this.
Okay, so moved and seconded to table the motion discussing this added tri-state monitoring position. All in favor of tabling, raise your hand and say aye.
Can I ask a question about
Wait, let me see.
Okay, we're not, I guess I have two hands up, sorry. Although isn't this, I'm sorry, Graham, but isn't motion to table mandatory vote?
Yeah, let me see what level of discussion we need to have.
I'm not asking to change to stop a vote. I'm just trying to ask clarification on what tabling actually means in this case.
Okay, fair. We'll let.
That's a good point. So would we continue this to next month's meeting? Yeah, so I'm seeing enough. So actually we'll restate this as a motion to continue this matter to the November meeting. Okay, do we have a second for that motion? Kohler second.
I see Kohler still, yeah.
Okay.
Is that clear enough, Tim?
Yes, thank you.
All right, great. Okay, then let's just, so it's clear, we're voting at this point to table till next meeting. If this vote is unsuccessful, we'll continue discussion in this meeting about this position. So all in favor of tabling?
1, 2, 3,
Keep them
4,
up, keep them
5,
up.
6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, 9
Okay.
in favor of tabling.
Opposed to tabling? I see Holly.
Holly has hers, so 1 opposed. Holly is opposed.
Abstentions to this vote. Okay, so the tabling motion passes. We'll bring this topic up next month. I will endeavor to preview it a little bit better so that we don't spend a ton of time talking about it in the meeting, that we actually kind of know what we're trying to accomplish. Anybody feel free to reach out to me in the meantime for clarity on that. You know, I was the one that brought it up and got it put on the agenda. So I'm happy to, to interface with anybody about the good, the bad, and the ugly on this. Okay, so before we move out of this section of the agenda, a couple more comments. I see Kirsten go first and then Rachel.
Yeah, it occurred to me during this last few minutes that we probably didn't change the policy. We probably still have a tri-state rep that we're supposed to be voting on. Not a monitor, but we have an existing position called tri-state rep. Graham? Don't we? Can't go to the board meeting doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
So yeah, so I mean, what we have, right, is a director who sits on the Tri-State Board of Directors. And so I guess what we had voted on, and I'd have to go back to really look at the meeting minutes about a year ago when we voted to no longer send a director to Tri-State. I mean, you can, if the motion gets taken up, reconsider sending a director to Tri-State again, if you'd like.
I just didn't want to, if it's already a position, I didn't want to create a new position. Maybe talk about this next month, but I didn't want us to get in trouble and say, hey, this is a position we were supposed to vote on today.
Yeah,
and we
no, No, not for that. We voted to not have anyone serve as the director to Tri-State, and that would stand. That doesn't have to wait and be redone annually. At any time the board wants to take that question up again and reconsider it, it can. It doesn't have to be at an annual election.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for bringing up, trying to get clarity on that, Kirsten. Yeah, Rachel, go ahead.
I wanted to make a recommendation, Ted. I heard, at the early start of this meeting, Kohler mentioned that felt a little, I think it was Kohler, like, whoa, what is this? A little bit sudden, and I agree with that. And then just kind of the commentary as this has moved forward has been asking for more clarification. So very much appreciate the offer to call and have one-on-one. Would you be willing to also just type up, here's the intent, the why behind this position, and here's what that could look like, and that at least gives us all some basis, shared understanding of what's being proposed, so we can work off of that and to build something that makes sense or feel more informed as we go to vote.
Yeah, Rachel, thanks for that comment. And I'm happy to do that with the understanding that it really is just my suggestion, and that whatever this, sort of, if there is a position and what it is, really is up to the full board. So I appreciate that. And that's like, I can do that to at least kick off the process. So thank you for that. And then I would also just comment, I appreciate, Kohler's immediate response when this came up, that it was sudden and a surprise. And I would just comment that, board action, showed that, and that this, this went, this is an example of the board working the way it should work, is, that this, we as a board didn't feel like we were ready to bring this up. And, Robert's Rules of Orders and all of those good things worked in this moment. And we will, it's been tabled, and we'll bring it up in better context with more planning in the future. So great. Thanks for that. That gets us through what was item D, 4D on the agenda. Golly gee whiz, we're almost on time. So great work, board, and great discussion through that whole process. Elections can be challenging, whether they're, full board elections or leadership elections, but it's part of what we do as a team. So thank you for that. As we are sort of on time and moving ahead, I'll just make a reminder here. If you haven't noticed, there is quite a long executive session planned for this meeting. So if we can do our best to continue to try and stay on time, you may also note that the time allotted to CEO and staff reports is somewhat truncated as compared to usual. So Graham and staff will be moving through that pretty quickly. And not that we shouldn't have questions or comments, but let's kind of keep our eye on the clock as we do it. Then I will quit wasting time and move us on to agenda section 5 and turn the mic over to Graham for CEO and staff reports.
Thank you. Drew, could you share the dashboard, please?
Yep, sure can. How's that?
Right. So start real quick with our picture that we've had a lot, right? Which also has our La Plata 85 logo in the bottom. We all saw that rolled out last year. And I got to say, just going around the state to different meetings and meeting with people, it's been a huge hit. Everybody's a big fan of that. So great job, Amanda, and especially Monica Vick and their team for getting that launched. Has been really well received. Next slide, please. All right, all green check marks. Everything's doing well. Kirsten.
Yeah, super. Congratulations on the 97.33 on the safety thing. On the average safety meeting attendance. I would like to suggest that the board also take up some sort of a safety moment every time that we meet, whether it's about where the fire exits are, or today it's a reminder that don't sit in your chair all day, guys, just because we're stuck here. Make sure you stand up. And I would like to see going forward that we have an actual item for safety in the board agenda.
Noted, and that makes sense. Any other questions on this KPI page? All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, just want to highlight on here that we're 75% of our requested data for our cost of service study has been submitted. That's been a big lift by staff. So congratulations to everybody on LPEA's end that has worked so hard to get that in a timely manner and keep progressing us towards a cost of service study that'll give us some insight into rate design in the future. Any other questions on this slide? All right, let's go to the next one. On this, I just want to highlight a couple of things under our capital projects schedule. I would note that there's a decent amount of work that we're probably not going to get completed in this construction season due to issues with the State Historic Preservation Office and the way it has to interact with federal agencies on reviewing projects that cross or touch and concern federal land. There's a sort of larger issue going on around the state with utility developments around that, especially line upgrades and grid hardening. But I will say that another good point out for our staff's ability to pivot and still get quite a bit accomplished this year. I think we're going to end up with pretty well within our accomplishment goals as far as percentage wise. It's just it's not going to be maybe the exact projects we were anticipating, but great job to staff to be able to pivot and get those things taken care of. Joe.
Yeah, I had a brief discussion last meeting with Dan about this, the state, Historic Preservation Office. I'm a little bit concerned as we go forward, as we add to our inventory of power sources, that we're going to run into this a lot. Is the state legislature looking at this, or is there any way to actually find out what it is that they're wanting and make sure that we're not getting stopped in our tracks for this kind of stuff?
So the governor's office is paying attention, and I was able to meet with CREA and Excel and the Colorado Energy Office and the State Historic Preservation Office and try and find a way to navigate this. I've made some suggestions. I found other state public utilities commissions that have come to agreements between the SHPO and particular. So like the example I found is the Federal Bureau of Land Management for Wyoming has come to an agreement with the Wyoming SHPO on what the proper scope of right-of-way review is for the width of a transmission line. And so I'm trying to advocate that as a streamline of these process. I mean, the trick is this isn't a utility specific issue. It's an issue of the sort of interrelationship of state government and federal government. And so in a way, we're kind of caught in a crossfire. And one of the real issues that I've found in dealing with this is it's just almost impossible to get everyone in the same room. If you heard my list of people that I met with Excel, Governor's Office, Colorado Energy Office, Colorado SHPO, there was no one from the federal government there. And that's a big part of the issue. This issue really flares up when you're dealing with permitting on federal lands. So just we've got a really good working, as LPEA, we've got a really good working relationship with our federal agency managers in the area. And, we're trying to find a way to communicate to anyone and everyone that we can in Colorado state government about this problem, but it just is the every time you cut a head off of one of this thing, two more heads pop out. So
is this, is there anything major being stopped right now? I mean, it sounds like we can live with this for this year, but going forward, any thoughts from the, field staff out there in this?
Dan, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I mean, we can live with it as a little bit of a, general statement there. It's, we do need to move forward on these projects. Every one of them have a reason for being in our capital projects item. Yeah, 1 year delay isn't gonna set us back too much. But we need to keep moving on these with priority.
And we need the cost control to be reasonable and within budget, right? If SHPO decides that the scope of review for instance, I said the Wyoming SHPO has agreed with the Bureau of Land Management that the scope of review for a transmission line is twice the width of the right-of-way. But, there's an argument from our SHPO that every single parcel that is touched by the project in any way, so if imagine a 160 acre parcel that just clips this corner, the entire 160 acres has to be subject to SHPO review and permitting, right? And so it could be very expensive and very time consuming to go through the architectural review on this if we can't come to a mutual agreement on what we really need to be protecting here, what we really need to be looking at and evaluating, and what is unduly burdensome.
Is there, can we lobby? A letter from the board, from Ted, stating our concern, would that be
we can, and we're working,
CREA?
Brian Hannigan at Holy Cross has taken this issue up quite a bit as well. So, what we're trying to do is build some coalition of interested parties. If there's a certain point in my experience with lobbying and bringing things to state legislatures that if you show up as a trade association, you don't really catch anybody's interest, right? Because of course the electric utility lobby is lobbying for something that benefits the electric utility. But if we come in with the Forest Service, with the BLM, with the electric utilities, and build a coalition that kind of catches the legislature, not by surprise, but like in a way that seems like, oh, this has got a broad coalition behind it, then that is something that's meaningful. And I think that's something that CREA is working to try and help establish that coalition, and a few independent co-ops, like I said, Brian Hannigan, people like that, trying to work on building these kind of coalitions. So when it comes up, when I'm included in those communications, which I typically am, we try to participate at any time we can, right? We had a meeting with the state wildfire preparedness board, right? Because Carol Hanks, our former fire marshal here in La Plata County, is the chair of that committee, and we were able to sort of pivot to this as a potential fire hazard issue and sort of help try and get them into our coalition, because it's important for grid resiliency and wildfire prevention to be able to make sure we have as up-to-date electrical transmission system as possible.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else about the capital project schedule or SHPO, Nicole?
Yeah, Graham, can you give us an update on the Trujillo substation delays? I'm curious, if things are just sitting with the currently where, we have an opportunity to lease the land and we're considering that, or I'm just curious what we're thinking with that project, and also how imperative it is to our overall strategy.
Yeah. Dan, could I get you to speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, Nicole, it's the delay occurred with acquiring the property rights with town council. They were a little indecisive on which way they wanted to go with a lease, a sale, easement, different models. We also had a new town manager entering the scene this year that changed things around a little bit, just having to onboard somebody, get somebody else caught up. But things are moving along well now, and we're expecting to have the agreements for a perpetual easement in front of them on November 5th for approval by the council. That'll allow us to move forward. We haven't, I would say this hasn't delayed the overall project too much. We were, a little hesitant to order large lead time equipment until we had pretty good insight that this was coming, or otherwise could use that equipment somewhere else if this didn't go through. So some of those things we went ahead and ordered, but we couldn't really proceed with some of the engineering design until this is completed, but we're moving along with it and hope for completion next year.
Kirsten.
Yeah, well, something you just said, Dan, made me think about the recent hurricanes. And I was going to ask this in Western United, David, but I'll ask it now. We know there were long lead times on all sorts of stuff, conductors, transformers, and such, like super long. And in Western United, they said that those were getting shorter. And I wanted to ask David if he knew how much shorter. But I also was wondering if these storms really just blow everything out of the water for us as far as being able to get equipment we might need for some of our capital projects.
I'll touch on that a little bit. Luckily, we had our transformer order in earlier. In fact, we're going down for witness testing of the transformer here pretty soon. So it's constructed, ready to go. They're getting it ready for testing. And, but, yes, and it's going to impact, I forget how many thousands of transformers that were needed down there, and like large transformers, like, I saw pictures of substations being underwater. So yeah, that definitely impacts that. And that was one of the topics that Graham and I were at a conference and they were discussing there on what was coming there. So it will have an impact. And it's going to take a long, just as the industry was starting to catch up, this comes in. So I think we're in fair shape right now. Jerry may have some more comments on that as well. But one of the things we did notice is our contractor for the Animas Valley line that we're going to be building is maybe heading to Florida to help, and so even labor is impacted, is what I'm saying there, on some of our projects where we have outside contractors coming and helping us. But things are moving along pretty well.
Yeah, and Kirsten, on the lead times, everything's getting back to normal except three-phase transformers. And I will be up there October 25th, and I will ask, and I know it will have a huge impact. You not only have North Carolina, but you have Florida and the rebuilding. So by a couple weeks, we will know when I get up there what the impact or material lead time will be. So great question. I'll make sure I ask.
Thank you both.
Nicole, you have another question?
Sorry, my internet is freezing at totally inopportune moments all morning. But just in response to the agreement for the perpetual easement that's being proposed for LPEA, I just want to make sure we have a strategy in place for to improve our likelihood of this being accepted. I don't know, and so maybe this is an offline conversation that I can have with Graham or Dan, and we can talk about what we can do to improve our chances.
Yep, that'd be good. Yeah, why don't you coordinate with me and Dan, and we'll get that conversation.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the capital project schedule? The other thing I was going to highlight on this slide was the our enrollment of Sunnyside Community Solar is complete, and that was another really big lift by staff. A lot of time, a lot of effort went into that. It was a pretty complicated process, so big kudos to everybody here that worked on that. Let's go on to the next slide. All right. Really just want to highlight this slide in general that, we continue to be a industry leader. You can see all of our engagements here, really getting out and about in the industry, which I think is saying a lot considering everything that it takes to kind of keep things running on a daily basis while we're here. So fantastic shout outs to everybody who's highlighted in this slide. Yeah. Tim.
Yeah, thanks. It is nice to see all this activity and outreach and so forth. But I guess I'm wondering about the format and participation and expectation board should have in attending town hall events. All I have is a calendar item at this point, and I'm not quite sure. I mean, a town hall implies Q&A back and forth. It doesn't have to be described here necessarily, but it's a week or so away, and I would like to understand what it is that we as board members should expect and our role involved in that.
Amanda, would you like to speak to any of that at all, or would it probably be best for us to have
Tim, great point. We'll follow up with you. We're going to have a staff town hall tomorrow. And so we'll expect to have some follow-up after that meeting in the morning. But thank you for that reminder.
Thank you. I look forward to it. One other thing, if I could, Graham.
Sure.
One other question here. In the slide towards the end where it talks about Dominic speaking, I mean, I want to give a lot of kudos. I've heard Dominic many times. He's always a joy to hear, and he always has great information. But at the very end, it says something about we are seeing tangible results. It would be nice to see those shared to some degree with the board at some point, because I'm sure there are, and maybe it's embedded in some other things, but this is kind of it called out to me like, oh, I'd like to know more about those.
I mean, results. I think the bullet right above that is maybe a good example of tangible results, right? So, we are, that actually isn't that. I was looking. So Dominic has been selected to be on a NRECA board on EV deployment, and so I think I know Kirsten sent around some application reminders suggesting that we should look into that, but I believe my understanding was Dominic was sort of specifically invited to apply for that and was sort of pre-selected to be on that board if he did apply. So he is on that. So that's I suppose a tangible benefit. One example of this, right, is that we will have sort of first access to a lot of the EV deployment analysis that's going to come out of this NRECA working group on this, and really sort of be able to hopefully supercharge our EV charging infrastructure deployment.
And Graham, there was another thing that popped up that was an October thing that'll be in our next month.
Yeah, I guess that's right.
Slide.
These
So
are in arrears. Yeah, thank you for reminding me of that, Daniel. These are in arrears, so this is sort of a September update, and obviously at October 16th, we've accomplished quite a bit in October as well. Holly.
Tim, thank you for asking about the tangible results, because I had that big question and thought process in my mind as well. And I think that just the fact that Mr. May has been hobnobbing with the CEOs of some of the biggest, RTOs and whatnot across our area is a pretty tangible result. But, I had a great opportunity to go to that in-rail microgrid training a couple of years ago. And he held his own against some of the biggest academics around the entire world. They were from all over the entire world, and he added to those conversations. So I do truly believe he is an incredible asset to this organization, and it's definitely paving the way of why we have, you know, him and Dan and all of the staff. All the staff is doing awesome work to pave our positive reputation as an industry leader. So I really appreciate everybody.
Thank you very much, Holly. Kirsten.
Yeah, this slide is a great opportunity to talk about us as community partners and the work that our staff does day in and day out. I think Elizabeth, I'm so proud of her for doing this with the chapter of Women in Energy. And Dominic is always a real force. I was talking to Reg Rudolph up from Tri-State, and he was saying what a resource we have with him. And I'm really pleased, and Amanda, we need to keep going on this, the focus group and the town hall events and making those fabulous, and really please get us involved. Please get us involved. We want to participate. We want to be part of positioning LPEA as an industry leader through public and member engagement. So kudos to everybody, and let us help. Thanks.
Thank you, Kirsten. All right. Move on to the next slide. It's some great pictures from our annual meeting, and then of course the one in the upper right is a check. We've got some donations that we're giving out to our long-standing members, our longest standing members, one in each district for each of our for our 85th anniversary. So and yes, the check is reusable, right? So we're reduce, reuse, recycle, right? So that is a reusable check, but yeah. All right, let's go on to the next slide.
We're not a rubber check.
Patrick, I'll let you take it away here.
Morning, everyone. September, we met our key performance indicators year to date. But I would say generally we did move backwards slightly in September. We missed our budgeted operating margins by 23,910, just about 24,000. Soft revenue performance and worse than budget expenses drove that variance. We saw, excuse me, gross margins were off by $170,271, driven primarily from softer sales in the residential segment were off 7%. Commercial revenue was off 5%. That's small commercial. Industrial was off 8%. We did see improvement in cost of power because of that, but the net effect was gross margins being under budget. And then on the expense side, we were 40,000 over budget. There was an aggregate of factors that played into that. We're starting to see some of that timing variance that we talked about earlier in the year closing up a little bit, which is completely normal. We're moving towards our budgeted target margins, but still above them for the year by a pretty significant amount. Balance sheet looks good. Cash position is still in a good place, and capital projects are still moving ahead at a good clip. We're spending that money. So proud of the team that's working on capital. Kirsten, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I sure do, Patrick. These are good numbers, and we certainly understand September and the temperature and everything. Can you reflect a little bit on the rest of this year as far as these goals, these targets, and then also about what may need to be changing in the next year as we prepare for our exit from Tri-State?
As far as this year's concerned, I'm forecasting that we will reach our target margins. I don't foresee any of these ratios becoming out of the green zone, so to speak. Some of that will have to do, obviously, we have some key positions that we are hiring. I look forward to seeing what happens with that. That will have an impact as far as the timing of when staff might come on. But generally, with that being said, we budgeted for that, and I don't see that pushing us out of any of these targets, so to speak, for the year. As far as the future is concerned, we've got a lot of things ahead of us. We have our energy transition as we move from Tri-State as our wholesale electric service supplier. We are contracting, with Mercuria and starting to look at PPAs and things of that nature. We do have debt financing for the actual CTP buyout from Tri-State. Those are going to have pretty large implications for the organization. We are going to have to fund the buyout, right? So that debt payment will require funding. And from an operational standpoint, our cost of power will see some variance there. And we also are seeing just generally inflationary pressures as a whole. We've not raised rates since 2020. So that's been held tight by the organization for 4 years. That pressure is hitting us now. Particularly, you hear about this kind of wage price spiral situation. Wages have pressure, and for order for us to be an attractive employer and keep up with the industry, wages are seeing pressure. And then just general commodities, as everyone knows, we talked about this quite to some degree. Have seen a lot of price increases over that period I just described.
I'd also like to speak to this real quick, that we do have a pretty detailed initial budget kickoff presentation that I think will probably cover a lot of those. That'll need to be an executive session right now because of the preliminary nature and the specific line item detail that we're going to be getting into, but we should also anticipate getting an update on that when we get into executive session. Kohler?
Yeah, at the FAC meeting last week, it was mentioned about one of our key customers, actually our largest customer, was reducing their load and might reduce it more, sure it might bounce back and forth. And I was wondering, and maybe Patrick, this isn't for you, but maybe Dan, what effect that really has on our overall load factor.
It does impact our load factor, since that, these larger customers run 24/7. But that's if the rates are designed, with the rates being designed properly, those costs are contained with that customer, so to speak. So it doesn't change the load factor for the rest of our customers, if that makes sense to you. It changes LPA's overall load factor, but the subset of residential and commercial doesn't change. That load factor is still the same. And if the costs are allocated properly to them, then that doesn't impact and drive those rates.
So I was actually looking more for the overall LPEA factor on how because that really makes a difference on demand charges and stuff. So is that having an effect? Because that's quite a...
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, our demand goes down, but this energy goes down even more. So the load factor itself would become worse, if that makes sense. But that shouldn't impact the cost assignment to the rest of our membership.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to think on that one, but thank you.
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah, I was skipping down to the quarterly expense sheet. And I just had a quick question on the first two items. We're almost $2 million there. Is that related to the power line, to the Bayfield to Pagosa power line? And is that something we're going to be seeing every quarter for a while, or? One's 960,000, the other one's 900,000. It looks like they're related. ROW cleaning and clearing and new construction.
You have that one, Patrick?
VM West, right? Road clearing. Third quarter we spent $969.85, and then Ward Electric new construction. That Ward Electric is going to be more capital side of the equation. VM West is the.
Let's try not to talk about specific.
Oops, sorry. Okay.
But you can sort of, if you can sort of allude generally to what these different contractors provide for us.
I couldn't comment on the actual specific site as far as road clearing is concerned, but you're right, Joe, on that. And then new construction on the 901-565, that's going to be CapEx. So whether I couldn't say that's ongoing necessarily every quarter. That's going to be project dependent, so to speak.
Okay, thank you.
Kirsten.
Yeah, down in the agenda, performance statistics part 2, just quick like, I see the roundup accounts went down fairly considerably, 68, which is a big negative for the month, and I'm wondering if we are still doing our stuff on that. We can talk about when we get to roundup. Time of use accounts are pretty flat, and I would love to see that grow because I think time of use has a lot to do for us. My biggest question on this is, what are idle services? Does this mean we have 2,000 meters that really are just sitting there and not really anybody buying electricity off of them, just paying their monthly?
That's something I need to follow up on. I don't know if Dan knows that off the top of his head.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about not getting that to you earlier. I just saw it and highlighted it, and so yeah, in the future that's great. I just don't know what it is. Thanks.
So idle services could be when somebody disconnects. They might do it seasonally. If it's a campground or something like that, they'll say, hey, we're going to disconnect and then reconnect later, or possibly a house goes unoccupied for a while and they actually stop service. Same with businesses, and have service shut off completely. Or we have built out for services to apartment complexes that aren't fully occupied yet.
So Dan, this specific item does say in parentheses excludes seasonal. So
okay,
have something else going there, and I'd just like to appreciate.
Well, and yeah, and we don't classify accounts officially as seasonal, but we do have seasonal accounts. There is a subtle difference there.
That makes it so clear. Thanks, Dan.
So it's essentially somebody who is had service installed but is not using it, essentially, right? Could be for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, not even paying the base charge because they've disconnected for one reason or another.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions on the finance page? All right, let's move on. Just want to highlight a couple things here, right? We'd had a request for sort of a broadband attachment tracking metric. So that is the grid over there on the left side. You can sort of follow along with that, kind of a mini dashboard within a dashboard there. So it can track our data there. Tim?
Yeah, I wanted to thank you for getting that up there so quickly. We made that request last month, and staff brought it to us very pronto, and I appreciate it. I think it would be useful maybe to add that to FAC agenda, just to look through and make sure we understand what that is at some point. So I'll probably add that, or try to add that to the FAC agenda as a quick sort of recap on what those mean and how we can interpret them. But thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Glad that we could get that together. Other than that, just want to note that this IQMS Innovative Queue Management Solutions grant that we're moving forward with and hopefully will be a recipient of would give us a good opportunity to develop a software tool that's going to our sort of I believe this is applies to second round interconnection application. So if the screening mechanism doesn't allow someone through the interconnection queue the first time, there's an opportunity then for them to sort of appeal it after a sort, and this would help sort of alleviate some of the time consumption that goes into that analysis of the subsequent review. Yeah, Tim.
This is actually about a slide a little later in the board. So
does anybody have any other questions about prepare for the future then? Kohler.
It's contextually around.
Yeah,
it's contextually around. What would you like to ask it now then, Tim?
Sure, I'll be happy to ask it right now, since I have the floor. So there's a slide, area of focus and power supply transition, which again, I think we asked for last month, and it's there, and I really appreciate that. But it's marked confidential, and I wonder
Yep.
Is that accurate or is that a vestige?
It is, and I'm going to speak to that right when we're done under item 5A, little Roman numeral 1. So I'll speak to that to the board.
Thank you.
Yep. Kohler.
Yes, on the slide, and I have it on page 25 of 128, prepare for the future. It talks or shows the cumulative. Would you please give me an idea of how much of that is funded by Tri-State and how much by maybe a third party?
Dan, can you speak to that? How much of the cumulative rebates are funded by LPEA or Tri-State or a third party?
The most of them are paid by Tri-State. I would say probably at least 3/4. But we'd have to do some digging in to get that breakdown specifically.
That sounds.
Is there any other third-party payments?
Say it one more time, Kohler.
Is there any other third party that contribute to the royalties?
No, not on what we're including here.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel.
I was just curious if we're continuing to, I'm curious if we're continuing to work with the grant group.
Oh, yes. So we do. Dan, what would you sort of, I mean, we do on certain projects.
Group, what was meant by that?
I believe
Third-party consulting group that is helping to identify and apply for awards.
Because there was one through Tri-State and one we've been using lately. The one we worked at through Tri-State, we haven't done much with in quite some time.
The internal one, though.
The other one's definitely helping us. Moving on, they're a very, very vertically integrated company, has engineering staff, permitting staff, taking some things to the next level. We are not engaging new grants with them right now, but we have other avenues that we are pursuing.
Great, thank you. I noticed we haven't seen new ones come up, and I wasn't sure if that was on our side because I know we have so much going on, or if it was more that opportunities were drying up, which might also be the case.
It's some of the same opportunities are coming around that, we're denied on an application on one, and yes, we're resubmitting some, but we're just getting a better feel for what projects we have that best fit these opportunities.
Any other questions on the dashboard? All right. Drew, if you could stop sharing. Share for just a second here. All right. So Tim's question was in reference to what we've kind of colloquially called the swim lanes, right? It's sort of a modified Gantt chart, has some red and yellow and green timing targets along there. And he's right, it is marked confidential. And we've done that in recommendation for other exiting co-ops who considered that document to be a working progress monitor for the board and the nature of a Gantt chart, and that instead what we're trying to do is really highlight power supply updates. We'll obviously have updates on our power supply publicly in our dashboard. We'll have press releases and things of that nature when we have contracts inked, when we have projects ready to fully unveil. Otherwise, this is the recommendation we've received from all of our other co-ops that have preceded us in the exit, of really making sure that this is the type of messaging that members have wanted to see and wanted to hear. You saw the video last month. Then we have our areas of focus and engagement. We have list of frequently asked questions, have an update on resource adequacy detail, and then sort of instead of the Gantt chart that we present to the board that identifies sort of intermediate milestones and stuff, we're tracking the public milestones here, right? So we have our initial withdrawal date. Right now we've had our power supply partner announcement, which is public. We have the end of the golden spike here as our exit date, and as we have new updates to announce, we'll roll them into this and extend the timeline with other intermediate public announcement steps that we have. So this is lpea.com/power supply, and it's what we've been informed by our peers as really the information that members are seeking, their members were seeking when they exited.
And I would add to that too, you know, when the focus groups are complete and we receive that formalized report, we'll enhance this copy exactly in the same way that we would take, you know, the commentary and feedback from the membership post town hall as well. So we do also think this is a ever evolving as we continue to meet milestones and continue to understand what our next steps will be.
So this will largely be the depository for our public progress announcements on power supply, if that makes sense. Kirsten.
So on that Gantt chart, I have a specific question.
Okay.
Wait until executive session.
If you would, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. And speaking of executive session, I see we have Matt Larson join the group.
Yeah, let's we need to address agenda. You know, we're we kind of burned over the time for board action. So my suggestion, and I'll look for acceptance from the board, that we just move all of section 5 board action agenda to after executive session, actually probably after section 8, which is possible actions resulting from executive session. Looking for anyone who objects to moving that section of the agenda. Raise your hand. I don't see any. Okay, so we'll move that section of the agenda. Matt's here. Let's go ahead and do public attorney update. And I know we're right up against nature breaks and whatnot, but let's go ahead and roll that sort of break time into our transition from public to executive session. Yeah, we'll give the floor over to Matt.
Thanks, Ted. Nice to see you all. Just two pretty quick updates on the FERC side. You know, both we had a settlement conference in the sleeving fee case. That's going to go back through another cycle of offer, counteroffer with Tri-State and trial staff and other entities at FERC that are participating in that case. The next settlement conference is set for January 23rd. So this case is going to continue going for a while. There's going to be another discovery process, you know, and you know, more rounds of back and forth, technical conferences, etc. So that's that side of it. The rate side of it, the next settlement conference, there was a preliminary one, largely perfunctory. We can go into it in more detail in executive session if you want. But the next settlement conference for that case will actually not be until February. So that case is going to stretch out here for quite a while, as is the sleeving fee. This is the schedule that the judges are setting. So no other real updates, as you know, all of those conversations are occurring in settlement, protected by the settlement privilege. I can certainly take any questions or move us on to executive session if that's where you'll want to go.
Yeah, anybody questions for Matt in public session before we move over? I don't see any, so we'll go ahead and sorry to put you on hold there, Matt, but we're going to take a 5-minute break and reconvene over an executive session.
Right. Sounds
So
good. Thank you.
We just need a motion with the topics of the executive session being attorney update on FERC La Plata County and related actions, power supply progress, CEO selection committee update, and budget update on 2025 capital projects budget and preliminary revenue requirements.
Tim.
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you. Second.
Rachel seconds.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. All right. Yeah. All in favor of moving into executive session for those topics, raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? All right. See you on the other side in 5 minutes. Yeah, everyone, welcome back to public session. We do not have any actions coming out of or resulting from our executive session. And we are looping back up the agenda to item 5, which is board action agenda. Finance and Audit Committee update will be the first thing on there. So as soon as we see Tim back, we'll jump into that. All right, I'm sure I rushed your 5 minutes a little bit, Tim, but we are on update from Finance and Audit Committee. If you're ready for us.
Sure, I'm gonna replace your gavel with a cat of 9 tails, but or a bullwhip. Okay, so Finance and Audit Committee met October 10th. As usual, each month. And the report, my written report is in the packet. So I'll cover a couple highlights. One is we spent some time on a topic around on-bill financing and a revision. And hopefully we'll got some clarity and some discussion around that. And Dan, I believe, and staff will bring back some changes, suggested changes to the on-bill financing policy for us to consider at the next month's meeting. If anyone is interested, be sure to come to that. And then we spent a fair amount of time on the capital credits retirement discussion. And just to highlight that there is if we are going to do a capital credits retirement in this year, that we would need to make a decision during this board meeting as to the volume and methodology. And with that in mind, the FAC did vote unanimously to recommend that the board approve a 2024 capital credit retirement between 1.5 and 3 million. And it was pending additional information on the impact on certain members by the VP of Finance. So if Patrick has that, then we could listen to that in a moment. And the FAC further recommended that the retirement be a 75% FIFO and 25% LIFO. That's first in, first out, 75%, and last in, first out, 25%. So with that recommendation and wanting to hear if there is a recommendation on that, or maybe not a recommendation, but the impact on certain members as to the volume or the size of that capital credit retirement, should the board so choose. Patrick, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Yep, I'm just pulling up an email real quick that has
Backlog of letters of intent to the tune of about $4.5 million. Couple of problems.
Somebody needs to
hear Patrick. We can hear some audio. You might want to mute yourself,
I
Patrick.
think that's John. Which
That's not me. Yeah.
John, could you mute?
Colorado, and they're trying to focus their business now in the western states. So
John Mitchell, maybe you could mute.
something that would put that route here longer term.
Bear with me, I'm just waiting for my machine to load. So on the high end of the equation, you are seeing a $600,000 impact at a $3 million capital credit payout for our largest member. And then that goes to approximately 100,000. And then for the remaining, we looked at the top 5, it's right around $40,000 to $30,000 impact on a $3 million capital credit payout. So if you were to do the $1.5 million, you could suspect that would drop by 300,000. And the reason we had this conversation, in fact, is understanding that this has got budgetary impacts on some of our larger members. So that's the performance, Tim.
So I got lost between 600 and 300 a little bit. So
it ranges from the bottom end of $30,000 to 600,000 at the top end for the top 5.
Okay. So I guess I would ask, in that case, that kind of impact in the estimation of sort of key account managers and so forth, what their kind of feedback would be around that to inform the board. Perhaps that's a question to Graham, I guess.
That is not something I have, and I'm sorry, as I ended up getting spread a little thin with other things at the first part of this week. You know, I mean, I could tell you that obviously $600,000 in capital credit retirements versus $300,000 in capital credit retirements would certainly seem meaningful bottom line to me. I don't know if Dan has any context on what sort of meaning that might have for.
Fill me in there, Graham. I was distracted here.
Sorry. So, so one of the things that the FAC came out of last week was the idea that we'd initially considered $3 million to be the upper end of the available capital credits to be retired this year. And we just sort of wanted to have an idea of what a $300 million retirement might have on some of our larger key accounts versus $3 million versus a $1.5 million. And Patrick has informed us that that would be the difference in 600,000 versus 300,000 for the largest one, then down to sort of like in the mid 5-figure ranges for those that sort of round out the upper end of our key accounts, and what sort of budgetary impact that might have for them.
We've got some lunches set up, I think, with some of them coming up that we can feel that out a little bit on. But my impression has often been that, what do I do with this check? You know, sometimes when they get it. So I don't know if it's something they're actually budgeting for.
Right. And that's helpful. And I would just say that the context of that was that there was a desire to preserve cash going into the next year's budget. And I guess my question to Patrick would be, do you still have that same concern?
I do. You know, there's a lot of unknowns right now, so we're doing a lot of estimation, but I certainly have, you know, preserving cash as a key key objective, but based on the current scenario, as we, as far as our financial situation is right now, 1.5 to 3 million is, we can accommodate those as far as a patronage payout at this point for what we know.
So like at a 2 million, sort of split the difference a little bit. That would help us to be a little better informed. Maybe that's a number, a target. And I see other people have hands up. I'll get to that in just a second, but I just kind of wanted to make sure the board understands we're trying to preserve capital, also or cash, I should say, and also have a retirement that's meaningful without undue stress on key accounts. And that was why there's the 1.5 to 3 million range. So with that understanding, I guess I'll go to Kohler and see what you have as a question or comment.
So since you did a recommendation, I take it that's now we can do a discussion on this. Is that
Yes,
correct?
so when the recommendation
Okay.
comes out of committee, it doesn't need a second. That is now the standing motion. So we are, correct, Kohler, we are in the discussion phase of considering the motion, as it were. So the motion as it stands is close. We probably need to make it more precise before we actually vote on it to get to an actual number. But yeah, so it will frankly, we'll need some amendment one way or another before we really vote.
Okay, well, the point I want to make is I'm opposed to a LIFO retirement. I would like to see all of it go to a full. And if I get a second on that amendment, I'll explain against it.
That Joe Lewandowski appears to have seconded that.
Yeah, we see a second, Kohler.
Okay, and my reasoning for this is kind of what we mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is that we have a big load coming up as far as capital credits that need to be retired, and I'd like to stay as close to the 20 years as I can. And I think that the people that are back 20 years, we told them back then that we would use their capital, no interest to them, and that they would get paid on a pretty good schedule. And doing it to the first people or the last people in to me is just unfair to those that have been waiting the 20 years. So that's one of the big reasons. The other one is, and Nicole brought it up in her question, is if we do pass this, that the LIFO ones, will they get a discount on their retirement? Because we discount it if you die and you get your funds back early. So I do think that that should be consideration as well. And I'm really worried about what was mentioned earlier too, as far as taking a little bit of a leave from retirement. I just think the backlash will be huge, and I think I probably join that backlash having capital for 20 years. So that's my thoughts behind it, and that's why I'd like to just do strictly the FIFO. Thank you.
And so at this point, just to sort of keep it organized, we're now going to be debating an amendment, which will be a number that we still needed to determine to be at a full 100% FIFO. So that we're on a motion to amend.
Can I ask for clarification on that, Graham, and actually probably Kohler too, because it seemed to me like Kohler's proposed amendment was not specifically related to the max number that we pick here. That's still to be determined, but that whatever number we pick, presumably between 1.5 and 3, that it would be all FIFO, and that is the amendment that we're discussing here. So just, yeah, do you agree with that, Graham?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Correct. So as we have this discussion, and then we will bring we'll have to vote on that amendment, correct?
Yes, we
Yeah.
should probably
Okay.
try and limit discussion to the pros and cons of all
FIFO,
all LIFO, or split between LIFO and FIFO, and then vote solely on that FIFO line item, just to sort of organize the vote.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity. So we'll give the mic to Dan Huntington in that case.
Yeah, I've gone through this capital credit refunds and stuff over the past 30 years at Basin Co-op. And we found doing ours was by paying off 10 to 25% of LIFO, took away the years down the road, 20 years from now, that we had less to pay back, and we eventually paid off everything. Everything's paid back in cash right now. So there's arguments for and against, but I think get on a schedule with a little bit of LIFO and then keep our 20 years on the backside. We might have to split years or something, but I think a little bit LIFO and the rest FIFO is a good thing to reduce that, because probably gonna have some pretty big years coming up later down the road. And just comments about one of the key accounts. I got an email from a business that was wondering when capital credits would be distributed, because they were working on their budgets, and they're probably, if it's all LIFO, they probably wouldn't get anything back. Well, that's my comments.
Okay, appreciate that. And Kirsten, you're next.
Yeah, speaking to the LIFO FIFO split, Kohler, I appreciate your consistency on this, because you always talk about how important the FIFO is. A couple of months ago, I know the FAC saw it. I forget, you guys, if the board saw it, about the number of current members who will actually see anything of this versus the folks who are no longer members. And it's actually, folks don't stick around for 20 years, so they don't get to have the benefit of having it paid back unless we pay them back on a faster schedule. So when Dan was talking about, it's helpful sometimes to pay a little bit of it back early, because then those people actually see it and you have less to pay back later when you have fewer active members getting that money. I think that comes into play for me. So for me, I think a 25% LIFO is very helpful for, one, bringing down what we're going to owe 20 years from now to people who are no longer here, and also to help with, I mean, we talk about a little education. I don't know how much of the education benefit is, but I want to help our board 20 years from now have a little less money to have to be figuring out how to pay for. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirsten. And then Nicole.
Yeah, I do want to pose get the question to Tim, because I think it weighs into my consideration of LIFO FIFO is, do we discount LIFO payments? And then are we doing a mass mailer, or did we decide to do, this is going to be all bill credit? The reason I ask about that, we had the discussion, I know it was a significant outlay to do, to send checks, but if part of what the objective is member engagement, LIFO payments are so small, and if it's just a knockoff of their bill, I think it's going to go unnoticed, and I don't think it's a very effective member engagement method.
Well, since you posed that to me, I don't think we discount FIFO payments. I mean, there is a time value of money, so I don't know why we would discount LIFO either. But I will leave that to Patrick to address definitively. In terms of education, I think it's what we make of it. We have an opportunity to utilize this as, a tool for some education, and how we utilize it and how many people we can reach with it. I mean, one is better than none, is my opinion. And more is better, 5 is better than 1. So whatever we can do in that regard. And then in terms of paper checks, I think we did not provide a recommendation to do anything different than what is the current methodology. I think certain retirements over a certain amount are paid by a check and others are a bill credit. And I think there's opportunities for education both ways. That was the feedback we've gotten in this process, which has gone on for several FAC meetings where we've discussed this. So hopefully that answers the questions. And Patrick, if I don't think there would be any FIFO discounting, right? So,
Well, LIFO discounting is what
Excuse me.
has been proposed, I believe, and then so the period would be so modest. I don't think the impact would be very much at all. And then the other thing, I don't know, do we have that from a policy standpoint? Do we have the latitude to discount patronage capital? I don't believe we do.
We do for estates that claim outside
Exactly.
of retirement, but we don't. I'm just reading the bylaws now.
Yeah, my reading was that we don't have that. But
Yeah.
we have to credit what is in their account.
Yes,
keep
exactly.
track of the account. And so,
And I can tell you previously when we've done a last in, first out, we did not do a discount.
Yeah.
It was probably 5-6 years ago. It was not discounted.
it would be
Also,
based
the
on a member's
policy-
2023 account. So there's not a lot of time there in terms of discounting. So does that answer the questions? Okay.
Did have one other piece. So the breakpoint for issuing a paper check versus a bill credit is $100. So anything less than 100 goes towards bill credit, and anything greater than 100 is a paper check. And I know Amanda's got some communication strategies on making the messaging more impactful for those that are less than 100, and that would be receiving bill credit, so to speak, which I think is kind of that's the problem we're trying to solve, is enhancing that communication, if I'm understanding correctly.
It's an opportunity to demonstrate to or inform members who might not be as familiar with the cooperative model. You have an opportunity to demonstrate that and inform that benefit. And just to answer one other question that I think somebody else asked earlier, maybe it was Joe, which is what's the difference between a full FIFO and a FIFO LIFO in terms of the number of members that benefit from that in this retirement? The difference was between around 10,000 and 35,000, right? So if you do full FIFO, you're achieving a contact with a retirement of about 10,000 members. And if it's a portion is FIFO, then you are achieving close to 35,000 member touches in that regard. So there's a greater opportunity, and anyway, I'm answering that question. So was there another hand up? So I guess we go to a vote, right, on the amendment?
Yeah, I think so, Tim. I think so, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, you're correct, Tim. I think no more comments on the amendment. Let's go ahead and take that to a vote. And I just want to, I think this is essentially Kohler's amendment. So tell me if you agree with this language, but we're voting between 75-25 split or 100% FIFO.
Yeah, so a vote in favor of the motion would be a vote for 100% FIFO.
Then
conduct the vote. Go for it.
Yeah, sorry, Tim.
It's okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using that cat of nine tails that you mentioned.
Go for it.
Yeah, all right. So all in favor of the motion, which is to distribute 100% FIFO, raise your hand or say aye.
So I got 1, 2, 3. I see Kohler, John Lee, and Joe Lewandowski. All right.
Okay. Looks like 3. All opposed to that motion or amendment, sorry.
See, Dan Huntington, Ted Compton, Tim Wheeler, Nicole Pitcher, and Rachel Landis, and Holly Metzler, David Lucian against.
Yeah.
And Kirsten Skihan against.
I didn't count, but any abstentions? Okay, so motion does not pass. So we're back to 75-25, and take it back over, Tim. We're trying to push for a decision or a motion here on what
Right.
what the number is.
The number is the important piece, right? And this was left a little bit, perhaps unfairly, with Patrick to provide us that information about the impact on the larger customers. And we have a little bit of feedback on that from Dan Harms, but I guess I would propose, if we're trying to husband cash and we're concerned about that as we move into a transition period, then I would say 1.5 million.
So we have a motion to, so now the final motion would be a motion to approve 2024 capital credit retirement of 1.5 million in a 75% FIFO, 25% LIFO allocation.
Perfect.
I have a second. I see Nicole is second. So.
Well, it's out of committee, right?
Well, no, but I guess, but we've amended it.
That's fine. I don't want
to cover the number. Yeah.
So discussion on that, Kirsten.
Yeah, so Patrick, what happens to that other 1.5? So if we do half of it, so we have 3 million that's on record as being that we still owe it. So it's just going to sit there, right?
It'll
And we're still going
age,
to owe it.
that's right. It's going to sit there. It's 2002 we'll have a remaining balance. So it's a partial pay down is how that would be
Okay.
executed,
And the way that,
so to speak.
okay. And the way that helps us with cash is that's $1.5 million we're not spending in cash this year.
That's right.
We will eventually spend, but we're saying let's conserve cash this year. Okay, thank you, sir.
Any other discussion on that before we vote? Okay, let's go to a vote. So all in favor of that final motion, which is 1.5 and split 75-25. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay.
And opposed to the motion?
Kohler, John Lee. I have as opposed.
And any abstentions? Okay. Motion passes. Thanks for guiding that through, Tim.
But that was 11, right?
Yeah, I'll go back to the video. Somebody might not have had their hand up quite long enough for me to count. We'll verify.
Just an abstention, perhaps.
Yeah, and we'll Janelle and I can verify that when we get the minutes together. That's what's nice. That's what's nice about these video meetings. Is that can watch them in slow motion. See when people's hands move.
I think that's it for the FAQ. Thank you. Sorry if that was painful, but it took us a long time to get there, and I appreciate everybody's participation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, FAQ and the board stewed over this decision for quite some time to try and come to the right decision. So thanks for all that work. On to Committee on Policies update. What do you have for us, John?
We are partway through new policy updates. We didn't have anything to bring forward. We will have that for you next month. Also, we have a couple people express, one person expressed interest on staying, a couple of departing. So if you're interested in serving on the Committee on Policy with Nicole, then there'd be a chance for you to let Ted know that so they can have some appointments for you on there.
Yeah, much appreciate that, John. And we'll try and execute that this week because there is a COP meeting scheduled for next Monday.
Yep, next Monday, 9 o'clock.
And I did circulate policy 103, delegation of authority from the board to the CEO is the policy that we're reviewing. I should have circulated everything to everyone. If you need me to do it again, everyone should have the shared document, but if you would like to get comments to me directly, I will incorporate them into the shared document so that they're ready to go. Also, as we've sort of heard, one of the agenda items to be prepared if you want to participate in this would be a review of policy 110 and the possibility of working towards getting a energy risk management committee put together as a standing committee, not unlike the FAC or Committee on Policies. So.
Okay, great. So, yeah. Anything else, John?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, thank you. Item 5C, three potential actions related to board meeting schedule and election timeline. Can you drive, Graham?
Yep. So let me share my screen really quickly. Everyone see the resolution that we have here? I'll bring them all relatively together, right? Is that we have our board meeting dates proposed for next year. And then we also have, would like to set our election. This election timeline is based off of a September 17th election for next year, which is what we have in that place. And then we also have would like to have an approval of using survey and ballot systems as our election third-party manager. There we go.
Yeah, thanks for all of those. It seems like we probably should vote on those as three separate items.
Yes, but I just wanted to sort of contextualize the interrelation between them.
All right. Sounds good then. Tim, questions, comments?
Well, I would move to approve resolution 2024-11 with two changes. One is that November 19th be a in-person meeting to allow in-person budget discussions, which is kind of where we're at each year in November rather than virtual. And the other one would be to require that one of those meetings next year, at least one, take place in Pagosa Springs. So that's my motion.
Yeah. So looking for a second for Tim.
Second.
Thank you, David. Discussion on Tim's motion. Kirsten, looks like you're first.
Yeah, thanks. I know we had to move the annual meeting and the elections later because of a mistake we made around our bylaws, and I appreciated that we had to correct it this last year. I don't like the fact that we're changing our calendar ongoing because of a mistake we made this year. I think fall elections are difficult in that they come around the same time as we're working on the budget. So we have a lot of things to think about. We've got NRECA regional meetings going on. We've got the CREA Innovation Summit. It's just a bloody busy time. And I would much rather have a settled board by then. Additionally, all of us, since there wasn't anybody new elected this year, all of us have spring dates as our 3 years. So if we move this out to September, we're basically giving ourselves 4 extra months of being elected. And and I don't like that. So I'd like to have an understanding of why, and my understanding it is because of the election that we're having to move it to September. I'd like to understand what it is about that. And Graham, is that you I would ask?
I'm gonna call on Amanda here in a second, but this is how it's interrelated with the survey and ballot systems as our independent third party. And we were concerned because a lot of other co-ops have their annual meetings in the spring that they might not have the capacity to assist us on a spring date. And Amanda, I believe, checked with them yesterday, and I believe they could accommodate May 21st if the board would like to move the annual meeting to May 21st. And I think we have the time frame within our notice requirements to accommodate a May 21st annual meeting date. So I think yeah, we were sort of rolling off of last year, right? But Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong. I think SBS
You're
can
correct.
accommodate May 21st.
Yep. Yes, and then I believe Janelle did provide a secondary timeline in the board packet that would outline our new deadlines should the board choose to adopt a May annual meeting.
Thank you.
All right. Kirsten, is that
That's a discussion right now.
suggested
I'd be happy to make an amended thing, but I think there might be some more discussion before we're ready to make an amendment.
Yeah, I guess if we're discussing though, we're focused on Tim's motion, which included just the November change and the Pagosa change. So yeah, is that clear, Kirsten?
I mean,
No, it's not clear. His motion is keep these dates as we see them on under 2224-11, and then additionally add in person in November and add a Pagosa date someplace in here. So it is these dates as we see them is what we would be voting on. So if you need me to make an amendment recommendation right now, I will.
I think that's correct, right? So the main motion is 2024 as initially amended, right? Which is November 19th to in-person and commitment to one in-person meeting in Pagosa Springs. So this would then be amending that main motion to move the annual meeting from September 17th to May 21st.
Graham?
Yeah.
If Tim would agree and the second would agree, couldn't they include that the annual meeting be May 21st?
Yeah. And so I guess, Tim, if you would agree to move the annual meeting to May 21st, we can sort of have a friendly amendment.
So you and I spoke about this change a month or two ago in context of the FAQ and in terms of budgeting, right? And Kirsten a moment ago asked for reasoning behind it, and I didn't hear any of that reasoning, right? I heard we can switch it to May 21st. So I think it would be helpful to share with the board the reasoning that you provided to me, unless it's no longer valid, around why it was advantageous to move it to keep it at September. And so that the board is making a fully informed decision. There were reasons you gave that I went, oh, well, that makes a lot of sense. And so
I can give you my primary reason for liking it in the fall. And then but I might save that until I let Patrick and Amanda speak to whatever costs issues might be related to that. That's not ringing a bell for me. Mine was more of a sort of a informational rationale, but I'm not saying that somewhere along the line I wasn't familiar with the cost basis for that I can't recall now, that hopefully Patrick or Amanda can.
Well, it had to do with how we budgeted and where we budgeted those expenses. especially if there were contested versus uncontested races and so forth. But I mean, if you don't think those are valid, I'm not trying to put words in anybody's mouth.
No, I'm not saying that they're not. I just don't recall them off the top of my head. So if Patrick or Amanda have the ability to speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
I mean, I don't have too much to add. When you think about how you budget, it's the contested versus uncontested. Running 4 elections versus 2 elections is markedly cheaper, right? Or more expensive, I should say. I had that backwards. So there's some potential optics to be able to be a little bit more efficient from the budget standpoint. As far as cost is concerned, the cost should be identical as far as execution of the election. Amanda, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't, and it wouldn't, our costs for facilitating the election will be identical, regardless of when the annual meeting occurs. So I'm not aware of any discounting.
Yeah. So I apologize if I sort of misspoke in the past about something like that. I don't recall it, which isn't to say that I didn't say something along those lines. One of my main ideas was that, we've had some questions that seem to come out after people have had some time to think about some things, and with obviously not an April of 2025 departure, but an April of 2026 departure, it's sort of this fall meeting cadence had made sense to me because it allowed us to have some time to work with our members and understand what their concerns were going to be and probably would be in the year 2026 after we've departed. But I don't know that that's any particularized reason to move an annual meeting. I mean, I would say that there were a few. Amanda, do you remember? I want to give Amanda a lot of credit for pulling off this year's annual meeting, especially with all of the sort of changes that we had to make and the pivot to a new independent third party and a last minute date adjustment and stuff like that. And she did a fantastic job. And so she really has taken that off of my plate this summer and probably has better authority to speak to some of that.
I would, I think a key reason for wanting, I think we can accommodate a May date simply because, Patrick expects to have audit wrapped up. And so that's always a nice benefit. And so I wouldn't recommend anything earlier than May, just so we're giving the actual numbers of the prior year at that meeting. And so I don't have a dog in this fight. I would defer to you all on what works best. Again, we're not going to see any cost variance based on timing. And so I don't have a recommendation either way.
So I'll change my motion to make that change then.
Okay.
I don't see staff having a objection or an opinion.
I'll change my second.
No, I appreciate you checking in with us on that, right? Because if it was going to be burdensome, I'd like to be able to speak to that. So, all right. So we have had a friendly amendment. So now we're considering the adoption of Resolution 2024-11 with the annual meeting on May 21st, November 19th meeting in person, and a commitment to one in-person meeting in Pagosa Springs.
And continued comments on there. Dan, your hand is up.
Yeah, I support that motion as presented. And most annual meetings are fairly close to the fiscal year end of a deal. So the May annual meeting is more appropriate, I do believe.
Thanks, Dan. Any other comments before we go to vote on that resolution with essentially now the 3 modifications? All right, then let's see. Graham, will you just recite it one more time? Exactly what the schedule is with the current motion?
Yes. So let me share my screen again, and so we can see it. So we have a January 22nd, 2025 virtual meeting, February 19th in-person meeting, March 26th virtual meeting, April 16th in-person meeting, May 21st in-person and annual meeting. So it'd be board meeting in the morning, annual meeting at noon. We're proposing again, like we had this year. June 18th virtual, July 16th virtual, August 20th virtual, September 17th in person, but no longer the annual meeting, October 15th in person, November 19th in person, December 17th virtual, and then a commitment to one of the in-person meetings being in Pagosa Springs.
Okay. Thank you for that. Joe, more discussion.
Should we try to pick a day now for the Pagosa meeting, or can we bring that back later? Does that matter?
So
it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, the authority is the place set by the CEO and the president of the board of directors. So that's what is reflected in the bylaws and policies. So when we are getting closer to noticing the meeting, we'll coordinate with the board and make sure it's appropriate to hold that meeting in Pagosa.
Yeah, and so that place also includes whether it's virtual or in person, because we do have these strings of 3 together and such. So we may, going forward, we may change some of this. I don't want to stop this vote right now. And it's a little lumpy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely appreciate that and the recognition that there is the option to modify that. Okay, anything else? Okay, then all in favor of the resolution as Graham described it, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed or abstentions? All right, we have a board meeting schedule. Let's see, the next one, it doesn't, did we no, we still need to approve the election timeline, right? With the modification.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe we can put that on screen.
Yep. So let me share my screen again and so this is based on the May 21st board annual meeting date. So we will need you to go ahead and fix the date of the annual meeting today, which you've already done. And then after this, we will ask you to to select survey and ballot systems as our third party. Then a lot of these are frankly as dependent on policy. This is just more of an acknowledgement that we've had some time to review them and see all of the kind of corresponding dates that will be built around this annual meeting, which we'll go ahead and get noticed in advance of, even though we could have technically, I guess, with the November 20th meeting next month, we could have selected that date, but we'll go ahead and get all this stuff rolled out accordingly. And this is on, if you want to look along on your board packet, page 35 of 129.
All right. Kirsten.
Yeah, sorry, Ted. Just quick, like, I know you guys did your math on this one. I just want to double check. There's no leap years or anything that's going to throw us off a day, and we're not going to be meeting our 60-day, our 90-day, our 6-month, or 2.5-day, whatever requirements. Are we good?
No, and I will note that some of these things you can see the asterisk on. These are deadlines that occur on a day when LPA's office are closed, but that often involve staff labor, right? Like collecting candidate packets and stuff. And so the ESC, rather than the board, has restructured, will typically restructure those dates to the next available working day in the way that gives the most time cushion for candidates, right?
Super.
So if,
Okay.
and so the actual, even though the deadline for the candidate packets is due on the 22nd, they'll actually probably make that due date the 24th or 25th. I can't remember exactly, whatever that next Monday is, to make sure that staff is here to receive them and that they're moving the calendar in favor of the candidates, as it were, right? To give people the maximum available time.
Okay. Thanks for bringing it up, Kirsten. Let's see, we probably need a motion to approve this timeline.
I
I'll
move.
move by Kohler.
All right, Joe Lewandowski, seconded by Kohler. Any further discussion on the election timeline? Okay, all in favor of approving that election timeline, raise your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, election timeline approved, passes. Resolution 2024-12, appointment of third party. Kohler.
Yeah, I'd like to move to adopt that resolution 2024-12 with one slight addition to it. And that addition under the now therefore be it resolved. Starting in the end of the third sentence, it says, and report final voting results to the membership. After membership, I'd like to add for clarity at the May 21st, 2025 annual meeting.
Janelle, did you capture that?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
All right, so motion by Kohler with a slight modification. Is there a second?
Second.
Gotcha, David. Any further discussion on this resolution with Kohler's minor change? Tim Wheeler.
It's been seconded, so we're talking about this resolution, right?
Yeah, with Kohler's slight change.
I guess my question is really about, we don't have visibility at this point as to the cost for this budget, whatever, and at least I haven't seen it. And is there an e-voting option that's part of that? I mean, that was where we considered cost differences between this year between a couple of options, and so I don't know if other people need it, but it would be helpful for me to understand. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm happy to speak to that. We do have our a project scope for next year that is inclusive of online voting, and the additive of online voting is $6,500. So it's
$1,500.
I'd be happy to send that along if that would be helpful. Otherwise, it is included in the budget.
Yeah, I think it is. And we have sort of included it as a sort of anticipated full election scenario, right? So we are budgeting for 4 contested elections to make sure that we have ample budget. So the budget that you were able to review earlier today in a sort of high level includes all of that.
And just to clarify, that's 6,500, right?
That's correct, is the addition to add online voting.
All right. Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yes. Any other discussion before we go to vote? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor of adopting resolution 2024-12 with Kohler's modification. Tim, is that a question?
See everybody there.
No, I'm voting.
Say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, I don't see any, and abstentions. Okay, thanks everybody. Resolution passes. End of that agenda item. Down to the bottom, item 9, reports, attorney reports and director reports. Let's take comments from the reporters or questions from the board.
Just refer the board to my written attorney report. Take whatever questions anybody has. Kirsten?
Yeah, quick question about the CREA Fall Legal Conference in Denver. Any good nuggets out of that?
Yeah, obviously they had some good follow-up information on things that had come out of the legislative session, and then also out of court and regulatory bodies, right? So the Loper Bright case has got everybody sort of concerned about what the future of the administrative rulemaking is going to look like and stuff. So there's a lot of discussion around that. And then some interesting discussions around pole attachment regulations and things like that, and some potential you know, where Colorado sits relative to other states relative to regulating pole attachment costs and how to recover them. So that was a highlight that that stood out to me.
Super. I'm glad you're able to attend. Thank you.
What else from anyone related? I see Nicole.
Is this, we're just doing all reports?
Yeah.
So just really quickly, I appreciate Joe asking the question. I think it bears repeating to the whole group. Graham and I both recused ourselves from the Good Food Collective vote. I should have noted that. So I don't think there was any conflict of interest there.
Yes, in the Roundup grants, we didn't participate in that.
Okay. Thanks for the clarity.
And then Western United Electric, we have our board meeting October 25th. And I will definitely follow up on Kirsten's concern about material delay due to the hurricanes. So that is very timely to bring it up. So thank you.
Appreciate it. David, Holly.
The CREA did not have a regular monthly meeting, but I did have a budget and finance meeting to look at their preliminary budget. I did send that out to you guys. I think the highlight of it is that they are budgeting for a 5% increase in general administrative dues this year and the next 2 years. There wasn't a whole lot else really to report from that. Except they did indicate that last year we pulled out of the safety and loss part of the budget altogether. And so they have penciled us in, Graham, because he's saying based on discussions with you specifically that that was agreed to, or at least acknowledged to be added into this year's, for next year's budget, a minimum of 2 days of safety and loss services at a total of $31,626. So if anybody has any comments on that or any thoughts on that, I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. So it was unclear whether or not participation in certain CREA programs and therefore payment for those programs was optional or not. And so we opted out of the safety program and have stood up our own safety program, and we're really excited about it and really enthusiastic about what we have going. So in response to that, CREA has tiered their safety program to made it a little more a la carte. And so we have budgeted to be in the lowest tier, because if you don't participate in it, then you don't participate in CREA completely. That would be completely leaving CREA, which I believe would be a fairly political decision on our part that I would leave to the board and not make as an executive. And so as we go through this budget process, I appreciate you bringing this up, Holly, because as we go through this process, that would seem to me to be the time for the board to evaluate that as an expense that the board is approving or disapproving going through the budget process. So if you guys want to open a discussion amongst yourselves about the ongoing value of CREA as a board, I would let you know that LPEA has committed to its own internal safety program that we're very happy and excited about. We think there's a few things that we can pick up out of CREA's mandatory purchase that we can utilize a little bit, but we will not get to 100% utilization of their safety program, even at the minimum level, because we're really excited about going forward with our internal program.
Yeah, that's how I kind of understood it, that the staff was really, wanting something different than what was being offered, and that they were excited about what they could do. So I understand completely what you're saying. In discussion with Mr. Singer, like you said, they have tiered this, and there's several cooperatives that are in the same tier as we are. So we're not the only ones by any means, and other cooperatives have selected up to 28 days is what I'm understanding. And that cost is around $68,000. So just so you guys kind of have a range of what we're looking at here. Basically, I think that the minimum bottom line payment is more or less part of the cooperative principle of cooperation among cooperatives, and helping to make sure that every cooperative is able to get access to some of these basic and loss components. So that's kind of the way I understood the argument from Mr. Singer. So honestly, I do support that. I do think it would not hurt to have a more comprehensive strategy as far as CREA goes, but I also really think that around NRECA as well. I think, gosh, we're just a drop in a bucket. Is our voice really even heard over there? But on the same token, if we're not doing things and being our, innovative selves and showing that, then, we'll just save our money. I don't know. It's now my internet's unstable. So that's what I've got for you right now.
Ted's on mute.
Yeah, I'm just trying to call on Kirsten.
Thank you. I should have been reading your lips. I don't know where you are in my picture. Oh, there you are. I think it's a healthy discussion to have. I don't think this is the time for it, but I would like it to get in on agenda. Ted, do you think we can fit this in the next month or two? The CREA and NRECA, the value proposition for them?
Yeah, I think kind of back to Graham's comment, I think it will be incumbent upon us from the budget standpoint to say yes or no to that sort of budget line item. So how I need a forcing function, that will be the forcing function.
Okay, super, thank you.
All right, does anybody have anything else? We are at the end of the agenda. So last minute comments or anything else? I see Tim and then Joe. Kirsten.
So yeah, is that go ahead for Tim?
Yes, go ahead, Tim.
Okay, so two things, I guess. One is in my board packet, the Tri-State report was September. And I'm just curious if the October one is available someplace. And so I could look at it. The one that comes from Tri-State, it was a repeat of last month's report. And then the other, I'm trying to get to it here. There was a report, I'm assuming it was from Nicole, about the NRECA meeting, but there's no name on it. So could I ask, please, that any board reports have names on them? I could not find I couldn't tell if it was from Kirsten or from Nicole. And so I was going to ask some questions, but I wasn't quite sure who to ask. So in the future, please put your name on the report, because I don't recognize voice all the time, and then I'll get with you. I see your head shaking, Nicole, so probably you, and I'll fire my questions to you directly. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Tim. Joe, you're next.
Yeah, just clarifying our meeting on the 4th. Do we have everything we need now for review, or will there be more things coming from Patrick? Or
I think if people have, so you have the budget book, I will make the and so just in order to kind of maintain the software integrity of Patrick's budget book, if you've got some questions on hypotheticals that you'd like to see, would you like something done in 2 years versus something done in 3 years or something like that? If you could email those to me, and we could sort of prep up some hypotheticals that you have, and we can recirculate those to the full board.
okay, and then we'll be voting on the budget in December?
No, November 20th.
November. Okay.
There's also a finance and audit committee meeting before then that you can also.
I'll email capital items and capital projects, those booklets. I talked about dropping those in on board, but I'll send you an email with those documents if that would be helpful.
On board or do Google?
Or yeah, would it be better to share them in a Google Drive, maybe?
Earlier,
they're in the Google Docs folder. If it's, I'm at your convenience, however you'd like me to share them. It's easy to email them.
All right, executive decision here. Email, please, Patrick. Yeah, so that sounds like the homework pre-committee of the whole. Kirsten?
Yeah, 2 points on the different reports. Nicole, I appreciate your report on NRECA. I think you should give yourself a pat on the back for getting that geothermal resolution through. You did a great job, and I really appreciate you doing that. That was great. I also want to thank CREA for helping us with that and really kind of showing us the ropes on how to get that stuff done. So again, Nicole, shout out to you. My second point on the reports is the tri-state report, which is last month, and I think the new one is out. The new ERA that is referenced into the September 1, we actually have more detail of in their October report, and that is they were able to leverage their multi-million-dollar grants into $2.2 billion worth of capital projects. And as we know, renewable projects tend to be capital intensive, and that also writing off, being able to write off their distressed assets. So they really got creative with that money, and kudos to them. And it does affect us in that it's helping us with our rates for next year, keeping them a little flatter too. They're going to be able to borrow money at an incredibly cheap rate, which is a huge part of their budget. Thank you.
And Holly.
Great, thank you. First of all, I did send out a class report of a class that I took, DR to DER, and this was not the first time that I've taken a class that just showed that LPEA is doing some awesome work and some really innovative work. I can't, be more proud of that, to tell you the truth. Thank you so much for the NRECA work and getting that geothermal resolution through so far. I do have some ideas on strategies on how to drum up some more support going forward if you want to collaborate on that, as well as a resolution surrounding the VVP that you were talking to Mr. Monk about. And I also just want to say that I absolutely, very, very, very clearly heard from all three of our District 2 representatives that they are needing representation and acknowledgement as well. And so whatever I can do to help support that, I am willing to do. And I also want to thank the support shown for D1 today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Holly. Dan Huntington.
Yeah, this is for Drew. On that NOBI training we were supposed to take.
Yep.
I had one hell of a time trying to do that on my iPad. And I finally got down to the last page and I could not sign it or sign the banner, what it asked to do. And so I don't know if it went through or it didn't go through, but it kept asking for a mouse, click on a mouse or a pencil on a lot of it. I don't have no pencil. I don't have no mouse with these iPads. And I didn't feel like it's appropriate to email that link to my personal email, do it, then email it back. That's another gap in the security.
All right. Yeah, Dan, I appreciate that feedback. I don't think that any of us actually tested it on an iPad versus a computer. So that's great to hear. So thank you for that. And I will check to see if it marks it as complete and get with you if we need to do anything else.
Well, I talked to Tracy early this morning and she was going to look into it. So, But anyway, I just wanted to let you know. And then one other point on the LIFO and FIFO, just a thought I had. If we go all LIFO, we're going to get more capital that's unclaimed. We start doing first in FIFO, then that's going to lessen what's unclaimed. They're going to claim all of that. So anyway, just a thought I had. It's a big jigsaw puzzle that we need to put together. Thank you, everybody.
Ted, use your words.
Anything else? All right, I'll let everybody go. A meeting adjourned, and thank you again very much for your participation and effort.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.